1, 2. Can you all hear me? Is the microphone working very well? All right. Thank you so much. Great. I'll say hi and welcome, everyone. It's great to be in St. John's. I know you have lots of questions, lots of issues. Tonight really is not about Brendan Mitchell. It's about questions and your concerns. And we're hearing a lot of them as we travel around Newfoundland, West Coast we've done so far. And now we're in this part of the island, and we have other places to go throughout Newfoundland to try to hear from our people about your concerns. You know, we hear lots of issues, a lot of hurt in our communities right now, individually and within the community thing. You know, we have a very divisive situation developing with respect to Qalipu First Nation, and we need to try to overcome this, and we do it by staying together. I'll tell you some of the things in a moment that we're trying to do to improve the situation that's impacting you and your families for sure, impacting all of us at Qalipu First Nation. Before I do that, though, I'd like to introduce you to Odell Pike, Elder Odell Pike from Stephenville. Odell is also president of the Native Newfoundland Aboriginal Women's Network. That organization represents 950 women and their families across Newfoundland. Randy Drover, on her left, is our new band manager at Qalipu First Nation. Randy's been involved in the Aboriginal movement for a long time in this province. He served as the National Youth Coordinator for the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, and he's also been National Vice Chief of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. That organization today represents 1.4 million people, status Métis and non-status Indians in Canada. Before we get into our meeting, though, I'd like to call on Elder Odell Pike to say an opening prayer. Would you please stand?
Is this working?
Yeah, I think so.
Creator, thank you for this day. Thank you for all the gifts you bestowed upon us. As we gather here this evening, please keep in mind that we're all in this together. We ask that everyone show respect for each other while they're speaking. I know that in our communities right now there's a lot of lateral violence. We pray this evening in our hearts that everybody will realize that we need everyone in all of our communities to stick together and hope that, you know, this will end soon. Your council are working very hard right now to try to find solutions to the problems that we have. And it's not going to happen overnight, so we have to be patient, we have to be caring, and we have to be loving with each other. And Sonogama, all my relations.
Sonogama. Thank you, Odell. As I came in and took a look around the room, I saw many people that I know. I see some family members here, some old friends here in front from Corner Brook, and people that I know, of course, from my times at powwows. I think of Jerry Evans back right here, as he's traveled around and danced in powwows with the province. Come in, please, and find yourself a seat. Since the announcement at the end of January and the many letters that were sent to you, we've been traveling around the province trying to meet with our people to find out how we can do to assist. As I said a moment ago, tonight is not about me, it's about hearing from you. And I want you to feel very free in what you say today. You know, if you have problems, your concerns, if you're mad, I don't have a problem with that. We want to hear it. Because we're taking your general comments and we're bringing them to Ottawa. I'm in Ottawa on Friday with a team of people that have been involved in the Enrolment Process Implementation Committee. Also accompanying me also are Elder Odell Pike and Elder Calvin White from Flat Bay. So we want to bring a message to Canada which tells what's happening recently through this upheaval and these notices that went out at the end of January, and which I suggest you probably received sometime in February, early February. But we want to bring to them also a message regarding the hurt, the disappointment, and the ill feelings that we have. Odell referred to lateral violence a moment ago. A lot of people are disappointed with this process. A lot of people feel left out. If I think about the East Coast situation, and St. John's in particular, I'm already aware that of about 800 or so members of Qalipu First Nation right in this community, and you may be from other communities from the outside, we've lost a lot of members out of this band. I don't think it was anybody's ever intent to lose members. And right now we're being penalized because of geography. We're being penalized because many people came to this community or this area, transplanted from many other places across the island to do what? To get educated and to make a living and try to find a way to support your families. And we hear it also from people in Halifax and Toronto and Fort McMurray and Alberta, elsewhere in Alberta and British Columbia, right across the country. And we have members also in places like Florida and California. And yes, we have people who live outside of North America altogether, in Australia and Hong Kong and other places. So this is an important issue that we're dealing with, a very difficult issue. As I mentioned a moment ago, you received letters that were sent to you in January, and you got them during February. Just for the record, how many people have not received a letter yet at all? Okay, so we have people in this area also. And just for your information, Elder Odell Pike has been around the Aboriginal movement her entire life with her family, very heavily involved. She hasn't received a letter yet either. And everywhere we go, we ask the question, who never got a letter? And we see 4 or 5 or 6 hands here tonight. Another important question for you all is, how many people were are members of Qalipu First Nation and got a letter saying that by March of 2018, when the new order in council comes in place in Canada by the minister, how many will be left out? Can I see those hands? Oh my God. All right. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of hurt. So we need to hear from you shortly. I just want to give you some of the numbers with respect to what came out of the enrollment process in the announcement that came at the end of January. It's been long anticipated. I felt it wasn't going to be easy, but I had no idea that 10,512 people would be impacted. So if this thing goes through the way it's been set up right now, we're going to lose 44.5% of the membership of Qalipu First Nation. Do anybody think that's too many? Yes. Absolutely, and so do I, and so do these people. Thank you. Thank you. And so do our council. My honest opinion to you all is this: if one person goes out who's a member today, that's too many. You have held a card as a status person in Canada, or will have held a card for 6 to 7 years. When the minister finally goes to make a new order in council and parliament, it is unconscionable for me that Canada, as our nation and our government, would say after 6 or 7 years, you are not a status Indian anymore in this country. That's a tough one, you know. We were a long time getting to where we are. The fight and the scrap never started yesterday. It started before 1970. But there were people in what I call the modern Aboriginal movement in Newfoundland who have been working toward recognition for all of us for a long time. People like Calvin White, Marlon John from Conn River, Tony John from Glenwood, my father Jack Mitchell, John Oliver out of Flat Bay, Wilson Sams. There were so many of them that started this. And yes, Brendan Shepherd, up until he's been in the F&I for a long time also as our chief back in the day. And he never gave up the scrap to try to get us recognition. And so those people worked pretty hard. And they persevered to get us to where we are. And that was a wonderful moment for all of us, wasn't it? To be able to be recognized in 2011. To receive a card saying, congratulations, you're a status Indian in Canada. It's so hard for someone to say, give it back to me. You're no longer a status Indian anymore. That is a shame. And this is what we're trying now to fix as much as we can. I don't know if we're going to fix for everybody. The other group of people we're concerned about are those people that applied to this band, never got in, and right now we know about 65,000 of them have what? No right to appeal. It's terrible. Because they never self-identified in this process. So about 20,000 people have a right to appeal. And if they are you, any of you, you must put that appeal in. Thank you very much. I know you're out there. You have to make sure that you appeal this process. The Federation of Newfoundland Indians and Qalipu First Nation are also making an appeal on your behalf. We're appealing for people under the point system, first of all, or people that we think fairly should be involved in this process. And there's a lot of them. The point system was a difficult situation for us all. It applied to people who live away from home, or live away from our Aboriginal communities. Unfortunately for you and your families, St. John's has never been recognized, and Paradise and Mount Pearl and these places have never been recognized as Aboriginal communities in Newfoundland. You're being hurt by geography. And that's a tough situation. And again, you know, why did people live where they lived or move away from their homes? And many of you people, I know you're transplanted from somewhere else in this island. A lot of you from the West Coast. You have roots in Bay St. George and Corner Brook and other places, Port Peninsula and so forth, and in central Newfoundland. And all of these areas are by and large Aboriginal community areas, but unfortunately St. John's isn't. I'm not surprised, by the way, at the turnout today. You know, this is a lot of people. So we've had 230 sometimes in meetings, 167, 123 at another place. And we had a small crowd in Flat Bay because Flat Bay is a small community. We had about 70 people or so that came out there. But everywhere we go, people are very concerned. So what are the numbers? It's not a great consolation for me that 18,044 people today are in this process yet. But we have to work on the rest because there will be an appeal process. The band size at 18,044 was made up of people that came in and people that went out. We lost 10,512 people. We haven't lost them yet, but people have letters saying they won't be in this process anymore after the minister puts a new order in council in place. We're bringing in 4,679 new people, but that's out of about 75,000 applicants who came in through this process. So that isn't a great number. That's a pretty low percentage of people that got in that actually took the effort and the time to apply. You know, and we have to try to do something about those areas too. It's a tough situation. I want to be honest with you. We have an agreement called the Agreement in Principle, which organized us in the beginning and created the band in September 22nd, 2011. Following that time, up to the end of November 2012, about 75,000 plus people made application to Qalipu First Nation, trying to become members of the band. That was a great event, in my view. I said earlier, we've been all our lives, you know, struggling to get recognition. We finally did. We just created a situation, though, right now with your results of your letters that will have the effect of this. Number one, negating a lot of the tremendous goodwill that has been created through the formation of Qalipu First Nation. Goodwill by way of your own acceptance of who you are, where you came from, your ancestry, your culture, and all those things. The last 5 years have been a time of tremendous growth at Qalipu. We've been working on our culture. We've been working on our communities. We've been working hard on education. We've been providing benefits to our members. Maybe all of you have taken some of these benefits. And you know what? There's no shame in that. This is your entitlement as First Nations people in Canada. So we've come a long way. But what this thing is doing for us right now is creating a lot of negative. It's negating from all the good things we've been doing. But it's very divisive for families. You know, we hear stories of two brothers or sisters. One is in the band, one isn't. Most times, though, one is living at home and one is living away. But we hear all kinds of stories. Twins in the same house. Same applications, same background. One twin is in and the other never got in. We're trying to understand how all these anomalies happen. We believe there have been many errors in this process also. So we have to try to work through and filter through all the problems that have been raised by people like you in these meetings as we travel around the province. So following our meeting tonight, you know, we'll be here. We'd like to hear some of your stories, but we'll hear your stories as we get going in a moment to hear your part of our evening, and we'll hand you the microphone so that other people can hear your story. And there are many. I will be honest with you, though, and say this. There are a lot of people who came into this process at the back end and very late in it. For example, 40,000 applications received in the last 2 months, 20,000 in the last week, and 3,500, for example, on the very last Friday of a 4-year application period. And I've talked to people, and these are honest stories. A lady approaches me and says, I'm waiting on my letter. Oh, I said, very good. I hope it's successful. Well, she says, well, I don't know if I'm Indian, but I put an application in. I said, well, why did you do that? If you're not an Indian person, I have no ancestry. Well, she said, I heard they're giving away free stuff, so I put my application in like a lot of other people did. Well, the gentleman I meet, for example, one at Canadian Tire, his name is Kevin. came up to me and said, I got my application and hope for my card. And I know people in Corner Brook, just like Peter French knows people in Corner Brook right here. He's a relative of mine. And I say to Kevin, I said, Kevin, I didn't know your family was Aboriginal background. And he says, well, I don't either, but I put it in anyway. You never know, I might get it. So a lot of these people who came into the end are impacting a lot of us right now, and a lot of you. I want you to understand that. I'm having difficulty scrapping and fighting for all of these people that may be in the back end of this thing. And I don't know the numbers. I'm hoping it's very small. I'm hoping it's a minority, with respect to the 103,000 people that were involved in this process. So this is a tough situation that we're facing, We're not here smiling today too much and happy about what's going on. You're here because you're concerned. There is an opportunity for those people to appeal. Let me tell you about that. So you have to make an appeal if you can. I will be speaking with Canada on Friday and expressing my concerns about all those people in this process that have no right to appeal. More than 65,000 involved in that because they could not meet self-identification in this process. Let me explain that to you a little bit so you understand. Self-identification happened in two ways. For those of us that had an application in before September 22nd, yes, 2011, we met self-ID by signing the application saying I'm self-identifying as an Aboriginal person. But anybody who came into this process after the band was formed had to go through a more rigorous process. Meaning, you had to prove, if you put an application in September 23rd or later in 2011, you had to show you were a member of a band. Federation of Newfoundland Indians, Qalipu Band, Benwa Nation, Sipkak Band, I think is a Qalipu Band, Speltic Band in Central, and so forth. And maybe Flat Bay was considered in with that group too. You had to show that. The second way you could self-identify was have your name on a census, 2006 or earlier, saying that you're an Aboriginal person, you self-declared. Another way you could have done it, you made it an application, for example, to a job. You know how years ago you go to Canada Manpower and say, are you an Aboriginal person? You check the block, or a federal government job, or maybe even with the university. You do those kinds of things, Another way would be, of course, to provide evidence that you were at an event, a cultural event. I think they wrote up about powwows. You ever have any idea how new powwows are to most of us? The Con River Group has been having powwows for 25 years, and we're going into the 11th year of the Flat Bay powwow this year. So powwows are pretty recent, in our lives. And there was another opportunity to send in some correspondence that you may have received through a band office and so forth. So for those people that came in new and weren't involved in any of this, maybe like some of your families, had a very difficult time meeting self-identification. And this is why so many people were turned down for self-identification, because you were in that latter group that came after September 23rd and beyond in 2011. So then those people have to go through a different set of hoops than those of us that got in early and just signed our name saying, I self-identify. So I just wanted to share that with you. So the self-ID thing became a very important issue, and it had a very important impact for those people that came into this process on September 23rd, 2011 and later. Okay? And I don't know why they came in later or why they did it. I don't know. Most of my life I've been a procrastinator, and maybe some of you have too, and some of your family members had. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe people couldn't find the information. Maybe they were looking for information from other family members and couldn't get it. You'd be surprised how many family members had stuff and wouldn't give it to anybody else. Wouldn't give it to their siblings. Parents who wouldn't give it to their daughters. I know these stories. And these are shame stories, because we're here, we should be here trying to help each other get involved in this thing if we legitimately belong. So I'm disappointed that people kept information from each other, particularly within a family. We have some help with respect to appeals. We have people set up. No one in St. John's, unfortunately. I don't know, Randy, how much money we have in our budget, but I know you're getting stretched in those areas. But we have people working out of our Corner Brook office, St. George's, Stephenville, Grand Falls, Glenwood. We're putting people in Flat Bay, Port-au-Port. We're actually looking at Burgeo right now. So I'm not sure how we're going to get it done yet for St. John's. But if you people need help, I mean, we have to try to do something to reach out to you. You're our members. You're our people. One moment, please. So we're trying to get this piece of this appeals thing working. What I encourage you to do, though, is to help your own family members with their appeals. All right? I got a call from a gentleman the other day. Nice man to talk to on the phone. He appeared elderly, and he started telling me about the letter he received. And I said to him, could you read the second paragraph that tells me why you were turned down so I understand your file? And he said to me, I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell, I can't read. I'll get my wife. You know? She couldn't read very well either, but I did get to understand. So the point I'm making here is we still have literacy issues. We still have people who really don't know how to generate a proper appeal, so we need to help them. And you need to help them if you're their family members that can help them. So I want to share that with you and encourage you to get involved. One of the things we just recently did with respect to appeals, and people were complaining to me that, look, this timeline might be very short. What are we going to do? So I went to Canada and I said, listen, we need at least a two-week extension here, which we got. So the March 17th deadline for appeal submission has just been extended to March 31st. We got 2 weeks. If I'm hearing that people haven't got a letter and people are requesting their documentation and don't have it yet, because you can ask for your files back from Aboriginal Affairs, from Indigenous Affairs, because you need those files to help you put your appeal together. If that is taking too long, yes, when we come close to the end of March and we need more, I'm going back and asking for more. We have to get this thing fixed up properly. You know, sadly, when the agreement in principle was put in place, I don't think we did a great job with the enrollment process. We've gone to a supplemental agreement, and I'm not sure if we did a really good job this time either. If we did, there'd probably be no need for all of us to be here today talking about what happened. I'm not sure when we're going to get it right, but we need to do something to try to improve this situation. I've talked to many people about this file in government. I met 3 times with Indigenous Affairs Minister Carolyn Bennett. I've had 3 meetings with a lady named Joelle Momany, who is Assistant Deputy Minister, actually owns this file on behalf of Canada in conjunction with the FNI. I meet regularly with Fred Curran, Canada's lead negotiator on the supplemental agreement. And I've met with members of Parliament. I've met with other ministers. I met with Yvonne Jones, the Parliamentary Secretary, to Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs. And I've asked for a meeting with the Prime Minister to try to bring some sense to this thing and try to fix this up. We have too many people hurting. You know, I go to these meetings, and I haven't got a lot of people saying to me, you know, great job with the enrollment process. Great job with the supplemental agreement. We're so happy that we're all knocked out of the band. It's a tough situation we're facing. For me, I have a responsibility to all of you. And I have a responsibility to those people that fairly should be involved in this process. I don't have the responsibility, though, to the lady who said to me, I'm not an Indian, but I put it in anyway, hoping to get some free stuff. I want you to understand that. Okay? So I like the idea that people get involved in this for the right reasons. You know, I want people to be proud of their culture, their heritage, their ancestry, who their people are, where they came from, what they were doing in their communities. I like that. And I don't have a problem, though, with people getting benefits that they're entitled to. And never be ashamed about the benefits that you get, whether it's a drug program or you save taxes on your last Ford F-150. This is your entitlement as a First Nations person like any other person in Canada. Honestly. Our members ask me, I got this letter, am I finished now? And I say, no. You have this card and all the benefits up until such time as a minister puts a new order in council before Parliament and determines who the new founding members list will be for Qalipu First Nation. So that won't be until 2018 at some time. And who knows, as we go along, we may uncover things that we never knew. And we may have to say, hey, you know, 2018 is, you know, March may not be where we need to be here. But I want to share this with you and your families. Those of you that got a letter. Anybody here get a letter saying you weren't in the band before, but you're in now? Is there anybody got a new letter? Your nephew did. Okay, we meet a few people because 4,679 of those people are now in this process that weren't in it before. I want to share something else with you. This is really important. You understand this. In some places I go, there are people who won't be part of this process. It was never intended for them, but they say to me, walk away from Canada and shut it all down and tell Canada to take a hike. These are people who won't be in it, but they don't want to see us in it either because they can't get it. All right? I want to tell you about shutting it down and walking away. This is important. I'm being frank here with you all today. I hear it a lot of times. And educated people say this to me. Tell Canada to take a hike, and sometimes they actually say words even a little stronger than that. And tell Canada you're not prepared us anymore. Well, if the FNI, for example, in Qalipu, and me in my role, I have a dual role, by the way. I'm the chief of Qalipu First Nation, your chief, but I'm also, by default of having had that job, I'm now the president of the Federation of Newfoundland Indians. This is a job I inherited. So what happens if Brendan Mitchell and the FNI decide to walk away? First thing, the appeals process that's open today by over 20,000 people, open to over 20,000 people, cannot happen because that process is between the FNI and some law firm containing lawyers and paralegals that we're going to hire as an independent set of eyes regarding all these appeals that some of you may make. So that's the first thing. The second thing will be that the FNI and Brendan Mitchell will be in violation of the supplemental agreement. And that has consequences. And together with that is, I've just self-terminated the agreement in principle. And I've been told by our legal counsel and by Canada, all bets are off, and the minister may decide to do this. We were formed by an order in council, not a treaty. The minister just may go to Parliament and say, I want to put an order in council in place to dissolve Qalipu First Nation. That could happen to us. I'm not saying Canada would, because that would be really risky from a political perspective, I've been in 2 meetings with Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, one in last April and one just recently at the Assembly of First Nations All Chiefs meeting in Gatineau in December. He started off both speeches by saying this: my first priority as Prime Minister of Canada is to Indigenous people. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister today how he feels about that today in light of the many people impacted, the many Indigenous people being impacted by Qalipu First Nation and the outcome of the enrollment process. That would be an interesting question. Another thing I'd like to do, of course, is this. I'll just be facetious here, but to say to the Prime Minister, Prime Minister Trudeau, here's the bill for everything we never got since 1949. Can you imagine how much money that would be? That would be a lot of money. In 1949, of course, when Joe Smallwood was Premier, he was asked, were Indian people in Newfoundland? He said, no. That was pretty convenient, really, wasn't it, for Joe Smallwood? He never had to take responsibility for our ancestors and our people. And the government of Canada probably said, wow, we don't have to take responsibility for them either because there are no Indians there. So since 1949, there's been struggle. We haven't had much. There have been some organizations like the FNI that were getting some federal money, and maybe some other small organizations within our community got a grant here and a grant there, and that type of thing. I remember when I was about 18 years old, I was on a little project with some of our own relatives at home on a winter wrap program, just before I went to university. And we spent a fall going around building bridges and putting windows in people's houses and stuff, And those were the kinds of programs that were available today. And yes, there were education funding amounts available in the FNI days. So anyway. So the appeals process is going to carry on throughout, well, we haven't got the legal firm picked yet, but it's coming up very soon. So that process will go on until probably September, or maybe it'll be longer depending on what happens with respect to outcomes of that process. And the outcry that I hear and receive, people saying, this isn't long enough. And we'll deal with this isn't long enough. So this is a very, very tough situation that we're facing. As I said earlier, there's a lot of hurt in our communities. There's hurt in our families. We were proud to be involved and included in 2011. But now we've had family members, one here, one there, scrapping with one another. One is in, one is out. Mostly that happened because of either mix-ups or because of geography. Again, we've always had high unemployment in this province, haven't we? I think we still have the highest unemployment rate in Canada. So our people went away to try to make a living for their families and their friends and, all this thing, and their relatives. And now we're saying, hey, because you went away, it's more difficult for you to be involved, and you have to provide a lot more information. So here's where we are. I know it hurt. I'm not seeing many smiling faces today. Today, though, we want to hear from you. And as your questions come up, I'll try to answer them as best I can. Some Randy will help us with, some Odell will help us with. So what I'd like to do right now, because I could probably talk all night on this and just say, wish that guy shut up because he's talking too much. People tell me sometimes I talk too much. But while Odell has passed out the microphone, so I just want to say thank you for a couple of things to Margaret Cranford, right here, and others, Sylvia Locke, Janelle Duval, who helped us with the smudging today. Now, I'd like to mention Catherine Anderson. Catherine Anderson is the special advisor to President Gary Katchanowski of Memorial University. Catherine, are you still here? Where are you? Over here. Please stand up. Nice to see you. And we've had many conversations, Catherine and I, about this situation. She's an Aboriginal person from Labrador, and she's very dedicated to the plight and furthering Aboriginal people, not just from an educational level in her role here, but in many other ways from a community level also. We had a chance today to spend 2 hours with Premier Dwight Ball. I'll tell you about that very quickly while we're passing the mics here. Our Premier is concerned. He's not only Premier of Newfoundland, he's also Minister of Labrador and Aboriginal Affairs. That's another portfolio that he has. Aubrey Gover, the Deputy Minister, was in that meeting today, and of course we were there, and we also had Frank Skeard, our Glenwood councillor, came with us to provide some information and support. So the Premier is concerned like we are. He's concerned about people getting knocked out of this band to the tune of 10,512. He's also very concerned that people, about 65,000 of them, won't have a right to appeal in this process. So we have his ear. I met with him Sunday before last in Deer Lake in an important meeting. We had him for 2 hours today, and he recently had an article in the Western Star in Corner Brook, and he talked about things like people having to move away to get a job. He also talked about concerns that we have regarding, for example, the drug program as one. Premier Ball is a former pharmacist, and he owns drugstores. So he knows how important these drug programs are. And you know, today we don't have people making a choice anymore about should I buy bread and milk or should I get my blood pressure pills or my diabetes pills. You know, so we've taken that away. But think for a moment, though, those people that will lose this program. Think about those that dropped their programs in their companies where they worked or retired today after having dropped their companies. If they lose this card and their medical situation has changed or gotten worse, it could be through cancer, heart condition, breast cancer, whatever it could be. How are they going to get medical programs and at what price? So the Premier, in his piece in the newspaper in Corner Brook, said that very same thing, and we've talked about that again today. So people in this government in Newfoundland and Labrador are acutely aware of what's happening here, and they're trying to provide support for us where they can. All right, I just want to give you an update on today's meeting. So first question up on the floor up here. This lady had her hand up for a while now.
I actually don't have a question.
Could you move the microphone up, please, so we can hear it?
I don't have a question.
Okay, a comment?
I have an offering. My name is Tara McDonald. I am a communications expert. I am an angry person right now. It is not directed at a single person in this room. In fact, I'm very glad to be here. And I just said to this lovely lady who looked a little afraid to come to speak with me that I am not angry at a single soul in here, but I have been waiting 37 years of my life to have somebody welcome me, and I have been welcomed, and I am finally ready to take that invitation, but I have not been given that invitation. My brothers as well do not get that invitation. I am a stride. My brothers are as well, obviously. And my husband is a Benoit. We are not Native, according to, as very plainly explained and very heartfully explained, for some reason that we cannot understand. I carry with me too much pain to continue sitting down. I don't want to. I refuse to. And as my hand went up, it went up not to ask a question, but to offer help. This is what I do. This is what my white education has taught me. I write exceptionally well. I am very eloquent. I am very respectful. But I am also very angry. And I offer, if you need help, if you want someone to help you write your letter, I am here. I am struggling with my own, but I am here.
Wow.
You are all part of the family. I have been denied for a variety of reasons that I have not even begun to understand. But you are my family, I am here, and I will help. And because this is probably the most difficult thing I have ever said, I have to leave. And that's why I need to speak first. So, Walalan, But please know, I've said my piece on the Facebook group. I am available. Every person that commented up until a point today, because I had to shut it down because I couldn't take it anymore, I have added you as a friend, and I mean it. I am here. I will listen. I will help if you need it. But right now, I have to go home because this day is too much. 37 years is too long. And I really need tomorrow to be brighter. And I want to help, and I want to invite you to a brighter tomorrow as well. Please know that if you ever need my help, if you ever are sitting in a room where there is a government that does not understand you, you are not alone. And I am here. And if I can help, just ask.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your comments and certainly your sincerity. It's heartfelt. You know, these are emotional times, everyone, and there's nothing wrong with that. We see it everywhere we go. And when people tell their story, it is hurtful. And there's nothing wrong with being emotional in that regard. Next question or comment, please. Up in the back. You know how to turn this system up? You can't hear people very much. Does anybody know how to turn this up and get some volume?
I probably don't need that. I got to read it out.
It's good.
Huh? Hi, my name is Jocelyn Sweeney from
Put the
St.
microphone
John's.
up, please, close to you.
Okay, my name is Jocelyn Sweeney from St. John's, and our family goes back to Jacques Lejeune, Catherine Jetto, and they are one of the first Indians to come to this province. And our mother didn't like to speak about the issue because she was ashamed. Like, I'm the youngest of 12 children. But she passed away in 1995, so in 1996 I started to research all of our family. The one question in particular for me is when you address the issue about self-identification. I'm retired now 6 years from the federal government, but prior to that, I worked 35 years with the federal government, and on all job applications, I'm going back to 1975, I have self-identified as non-status Indian. Getting the information, I also have, through the Access to Privacy Act, I went and obtained a CD that showed every job that I applied for with the federal government showing non-Aboriginal, or non-status Indian Aboriginal woman.
Yes.
And I supplied that CD with my application and everything else, and I've been told that I did not self-identify. That's a problem that I have. Like, how much more do I have to supply when I have all the twice I won Aboriginal inventory with the federal government? I know there's a lot probably more important issues than people may feel, but that's one of my concerns, is that I did self-identify, I have the proof for it, backup documents, certified documents, and it was not included. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We hear similar stories, but I'm interested in your story because you obviously, put this stuff in your file, all these job applications you put in. Is it possible that you could send me your letter and at least one of these pieces of documentation? Because this is another case situation that I can bring to Canada when they say a person didn't self-identify, and here it is in the file that person self-identified. These are the examples of the mistakes and the anomalies that we need to bring to Canada and say something is very wrong with the way this was done. So I'd like to have that information from you. If you're still here when we're finished, I'd like to talk to you about that further, and I'd like to see your letter. And I'd like to also get a copy of one of those pieces of documentation. Right now, you're in a situation, though, that says, because you never self-identified, rightly or wrongly, you can't even appeal. So I need to have that piece of information to show, here's a situation of a lady who gave this information, and now you're saying she can't appeal with lack of self-identification, but you already have it. Sure. Thank you. Right. Could you like to tell Randy, maybe? Come to the microphone. So Randy Drover, our band manager, is going to give you a hand with that one back there. We'll come to you in a second. Thank you. Go ahead, Randy.
You can call the INAC 1-800 number and advise them of that specific case to say that you submitted a documentation, one of the documents that was listed for self-identification, and it was not considered by the Enrollment Committee. As we understand, your name will be documented and there will be likely an administrative review provided for your case. So I would encourage you to call that 1-800 number, tell the person you're speaking to that you submitted the document just as you told us, and it should be, the process should look after it from there.
1-800-561-2266.
Repeat it again, Odell, please.
1-800-561-2266. It's on the top of your letter, on the left-hand side.
Okay, yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jeremiah Perry. Brendan, last year I had one telephone conversation with you.
Yep.
At that time, you stated to me, Jeremiah, they are making fun of us down here with our white skin. That is where you, sir, should have stood up to these external forces and bullies of Upper Canada. I guess instead you kind of capitulated and threw 80,000 of us under the bus for the mere sake of a few West Coast favorites. I have had several email, not real conversations with Goody Hutchings, who apparently appeared to be chief, not literally, chief spokesperson, unbeknownst to myself and many others. Here's what she said. Jeremiah, there will be an appeal process for you and everyone. Nothing short of blatant lies from that bureaucracy. In my statement to you and to the committee, is going to be who knows who. Is this going to be an who knows who fiasco? What about DNA? No response then, and still a debacle now. Anything short of a court challenge here is a disservice of magnitudinal travesty. We not only have a huge voting bloc here to throw at these lying MPs, but a cry of Aboriginal desecration. Hell, when I grew up in Bay d'Espoir, near the community of Conn River, I knew my great-grandmother was Micmac, but that was softly spoken. It was shunned. Later on, I spent lots of time at Conn River participating in customs and powwows and sweat lodges, but none of that counts in the eyes of some bureaucrat in Alberta, co-signed by these puppets in Ottawa. Not good enough. At a time, Brendan, when corrupt Ottawa was rolling out the red carpet for refugees at never-ending expense, we here in Newfoundland, we dare say that we are cultural Aboriginals and or Canadians. No, sir. We don't count. They are laughing at us. We are stupid savages on that little island, I guess. So, Mr. Shepherd, I say to you, will you stand up for us or be part of that political corruption? Shall we march on Ottawa in mass numbers and demand back our culture, or crawl in shame in a black hole and be extinct? Let's do the right thing, thinking together, and with the discernment and inquiry that ultimately will lead to a class action lawsuit to the Supreme Court of Canada. This is and will not go away. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeremiah. Sorry. And what Jeremiah had to say, he said many things. There's a multiple of comments and ideas that he's presented here. With respect to the idea of us being white, Jeremiah, some people in this country, I believe, we're a little white. And, maybe suggesting that it's a legitimacy issue. I hear it sometimes from Canada. I've heard it from other Aboriginal organizations in this country, particularly out of the Maritimes. People are saying to me, who are you people? Where did you come from? I have issues with the Grand Council in Nova Scotia, issues with the Atlantic Policy Congress. They don't all say we're like this, but some of them, we have some good support from some people. But by and large, other Aboriginal jurisdictions in Canada are not coming to our aid. They think our band is too big, and they have questions about who we are. And that's the honest truth, Jeremiah. In terms of class action, yes, there will be some, of course. The Mi'kmaq First Nations Assembly of Newfoundland, located in Corner Brook, have a law firm hired called Gowlings, based in Ottawa, I believe. And they are getting ready to launch a class action or a court case against Canada and the FNI, because we're party to this agreement. You know, for me personally, I got to tell you this. You know, if that has to happen, I'm fine with that. Whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. And, you know, we were party to this agreement back when the original agreement in principle, and yes, we were party to the supplemental agreement too. So if that has to happen, of course, fine. You know, with respect, Jeremiah, to, you know, what we all do, you mentioned demonstrating and stuff like that. There have been some demonstrations, by the way, in Corner Brook, 2 of them so far. There was a demonstration in Nova Scotia recently, I believe this week. I think there's one planned for tomorrow. No, sorry, Friday. So what should you do in terms of that? There's nothing wrong with a peaceful, respectful demonstration to bring attention to this issue. Sometimes the media can be our friend. And this is one of the ways the media can be our friend or our friends, by getting involved in something. So who organizes it? I mean, I don't know. Remember something, I'll tell you honestly. People say to me, you know, when are you going to sue Canada? I say, geez, man, I can't sue myself. Whether we like it or not, we're party to the agreement. So how do we go about suing ourselves as an organization? Other people have to do it. And the Mi'kmaq First Nation Assembly of Newfoundland, located in Corner Brook, have taken this fight on. They've had a court case already called House and Foster. Have you heard of it? All right, thank you very much. So one thing I do know, that in the last 10 years of disagreements between Aboriginal people and the federal government of Canada, most of the times, if not all of the times, the people have won. And that might be the case here, you know. So this will take some time, though, before this gets all settled. But yeah, Jeremiah, something has to be done in that regard, and people will have to take on this process, you or others who get organized. And yes, there will be a class action, I'm sure. And yes, there will be other cases filed individually or by a group of people. You know, why would the 10,512 people not want to get together and try to do something about this? I'd love to lead you in it. My problem is, though, I'm part of it now. You know, the FNI is part of this agreement. And Canada and my lawyer has reminded me, Brendan, you can't sue yourself. So other people have to take this on. And at the end of the day, it might be the case that the people win in this process. And there'll be a favorable decision that supports the people instead of supporting the government of Canada. Jeremiah, I don't know if I've asked you everything you've asked me, but you made a lot of comments there. I just want to tell you, though, you know, for me, I'm here to support you and others. If I wasn't supporting you, you know where I'd be today? I'd be home in my house right now, probably watching the NTV news, saying hello to my wife and petting my dog. But we're here because we're concerned about what's happened. The same reason why we go all over the province, and we will, and anywhere else I got to go, to try to meet people to understand their hurt and understand their situations so we can bring that stuff forward. So I'll continue to do that, Jeremiah. I can tell you, you know, to the extent that I can. And we are here for you as a council. We know what's happened here. This is tough, guys. You know, all of you people, proud of who you've been, who your people are, to be told today, you're losing your status card. People, though, aren't saying to you, I want you to understand this, they're not saying to you, you're not Indian or you're not Mi'kmaq. That's not what we're saying here. The process is saying you may not have qualified for Qalipu First Nation. What were we doing as Aboriginal people right up to 2011? We participated. We were involved in powwows and meetings and culture, and you practice our culture. I look right back at there, that man right there, Jerry Evans. He's after dancing at every powwow in Newfoundland and everywhere else in his entire life. And he does a great job of it in regalia. He's an Aboriginal artist, recognized all over the country. All right? We never had a card 5 years ago, but we have one now. Okay, so I'm saying to you all, let's not give up because you may not be in this process. I encourage everyone to keep participating and do what you've done in the past culturally. Keep it up. Don't let this beat you down. Let's not all be defined by a piece of plastic that we're carrying around in our pocket that says we're First Nations people. At the end of the day, though, we need to stick together and make sure that we're part of this process. And we have this status card to the extent that we can. And you know, most people don't want to hear, well, without the card, you know, you're still an Indian, you're still Mi'kmaq. Say, well, that card is important to me because my people never had it. I'd like to have it. So we get this recognition, so we have to try to hang on to it to the extent possible. Next question right here.
Well, thank you very much. My name's Steve Green. I'm here from Torbay. Just a couple observations. I'm very glad you brought up the health care, because I think one of the greatest injustices is the amount of senior citizens now who do not have access to the non-insured health benefits. And so I believe that you're going to see a lot of senior citizens, particularly in Newfoundland, not going out and getting the drugs because they can't afford them.
Absolutely.
I think that's, out of this, that's a travesty. Just a couple of points. I would recommend you actually email your MP. If you consider the number of people who have actually applied for this and have their status revoked, email your MP, ask them what they're doing and how they're going to vote. I have. Guess how many responses I've gotten back from our MPs? Take a guess. I'll give you one guess. Nothing.
Same here.
I think everybody needs to go home, email their MP, ask them. Your family, get them to email your MP. Email them every bloody week until you get a response. You want to change Ottawa? Put their jobs at risk. Then they'll change Ottawa. I'm also very disheartened. I'm on the family members list, but when I applied for it, I said Torbay is my address. But apparently Torbay is my address right now. Doesn't mean squat. So I find that kind of offensive. One thing I would ask the band to do is to put up an example on your website on how to write an appeal.
All right.
Since you can't have people doing this.
Odell, would you take that?
This afternoon, Linda, the executive director for our organization, the Newfoundland Aboriginal Women's Network, we worked 2 days trying to get a sample of appeals letter and also scenarios done. So that's posted on the Newfoundland Aboriginal Women's website today.
Okay.
It might be on the Facebook page.
Well, let's see if we can get some distribution of it. Let's call it appeals for dummies, for lack of a better term. So we can get that done.
We won't do that. We'll call it something, okay?
But, back to first principles. Because it'd be great if we actually had that example. And since St. John's is not an Aboriginal area.
If anybody wants it sent directly, what you can do is leave your email for me, and I'll make sure that you get it.
Okay, and again, thank you very much for the time. And if I can stress the fact, please email your MP and tell your family to email them. 2 questions. What are you doing about it? And if this goes to an order in council, how are you going to vote? 2 very simple answers. Right. And if they get their inboxes full, guess what? They'll be showing up. How many MPs are here now?
They were all invited.
All right. Any MHAs here?
All invited.
Okay,
Thank
you. Thank you so much for your comments. All right. So everyone, listen to this gentleman. This is a political situation, so you have to get political. There's nothing wrong with writing to your MP or dropping off at their office. Hey, why not take a placard and go there and say, MP, we're here to explain our concerns and do it respectfully, I'm not encouraging anybody, by the way, to go out, go downtown and break all the windows out on Water Street, Don't do that. But you can have a respectful demonstration, and again, the media will help you pass on that information. Peter, right here. Oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies. We'll get to you, Peter.
I'll keep them in line.
Thank you, Odell. Yes, please.
Hi. Excuse me if I'm going to be all over the place with this, because I work 12-hour shifts as a nurse, so bear with me.
You must be tired.
I am. I'm tired of having to write all the time, and appeal is going to cause me a lot of headache.
Sure.
I'm Maureen. I proved my Indian ancestry through the Garniers living in St. George's back to Augustus Benoit. I proved it for 11 more. That was years ago, my whole family. I'm going to go back. In the early 2000s, I was Aboriginal, Mi'kmaq. So how could I send in a ton of documentation other than what I did? Do you want me to send in a truckload? I found out in the 2000s through my great aunt in St. George's. My great uncle in St. George's had a status card for years. I did not know that until 2005. So how can all of us here send in documentation if we didn't know we were Mi'kmaq? I'm just going to start here. My ancestors in St. George's gave me all the documents I needed. One time I asked my mother in the 2000s, why didn't you tell us, Mom, about our Indian ancestry? I had a feeling, I don't know what it was with me, but as a child I was trouble. Always asking, are we Indian? Are we Mi'kmaq? She stated, I knew my Uncle Garnier had a status card, but we were called Jackie Tar back then. We were made to feel ashamed. I knew your great uncle and your cousins in St. George's were Indian. But I was too nervous about it. I was afraid to tell you. I was afraid of the consequences. I grew up in Stephenville for 19 years. I moved to get a job, obviously. I've been back and forth for years, proved it. I had phone bills this high, maybe a foot. I think I'm in the same boat of a lot of people here. We can't send in documentation if we didn't know. My siblings, my sister got a status card a couple of weeks ago. She's so proud. I have to appeal, and my 2 kids. I don't know what to tell them next year. I don't know. I have to take your Indian status away, my 2 kids. You are a Mi'kmaq, but you have to walk alongside people when we go back to Stephenville, with people that have a card and don't have a card. Feel proud anyway. But it says something, don't it? That says something when you got to walk along your ancestors who all have bloodline. We are all connected somehow. I did extensive research back to 1500s. We are all connected. We all have bloodline. I'm not ashamed. I just want to say a couple more things and move on.
Take your time.
Across the country, native bands, they don't have to prove their ancestry by participating. They can move anywhere. All they need is bloodline. Some have 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 11th generation. I researched this. They have a baby in Alberta, not close to their community, say in, I don't know, Nova Scotia. They automatically get their status. So the last thing I want to say is, I know you're fighting for us. I know you're trying your best. You can't quit now. The supplementary agreement states you get 9 points if you've been a card-carrying member for years before 2008, living in a Mi'kmaq community. How could I have a card? They were too afraid to tell me, my St. George's ancestors. You know when I found out everyone had a card? In 2008, 2009, that I could get a card. I just didn't know. We were all ignorant, I guess. I don't know. We were walking around Stephenville and didn't know you guys had status cards. How could we know? Everything was quiet. Everything was hush, hush.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, I can barely hear myself.
I don't want to be discriminated against. I want to be proud. I want to tell my children, yes, you have a card. You're gonna retain your card, and so are maybe 70, 80, 90,000 of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, you know, multiple issues raised. I will talk to this business about people finding out who they are, and they found out late. Yeah, many people kept this a secret in their families. They didn't want people to know. I was at a funeral home just before the end of the enrollment process, and I think about 5 siblings came up to me and says, we're applying for Qalipu First Nation tomorrow. And I said, well, why would you wait so late to do this? Why not before? They said, because Mom was in the casket and made us promise that while she was alive, she would never allow us, or promise that we would never make an application to say that we're Indian people. And their mother was being buried the next day, and they were going to put the application in. So what happened to you back there has happened to many families who did not know. People kept it quiet. People didn't want to be discriminated against. And you use the term Jackie Tar also up there. But Jackie Tar is a term used on the West Coast for people of French and Indian background. That's how that actual name came. But Indian people were involved with other people than French besides. So that's kind of a thing that happened on the West Coast. Yeah, but it's a tough situation that people, for whatever reason, never told you, never wanted to share with you who you really were. I'll give you an example, an honest one right out of my family. Anybody know where Stephenville and Harmon Air Force Base is? All right, thank you. My father had 4 sisters that had married Americans and went to the United States to live. Peter's laughing at it. This is Peter French, my cousin. I really grew up within 100 feet of each other all our lives. Do you think my aunts were telling everybody that they were Indian people from Newfoundland? Probably not, eh? What do you think? But my father was the first chief of the Corner Rook Band Council. He was a member of what we call the Warrior of the Flames. My grandfather was a man named Matty Mitchell, well known in Newfoundland and Labrador and in the Maritimes too. You know, he never had any choice but anybody to know that he was an Indian. But yeah, people kept it from telling. They didn't tell everybody about it, and we talk about it when we're together because we're kind of all in the same boat. But for many years, people didn't know where they came from. You know, I'll share a funny story. I had a guy come up to me, and he's related to me, and he said to me one time when I was at a meeting, he said, "Why, since I got involved in this Qalipu process, you know, I come to find out a lot of stuff. With the digging and research I did, I said I come to find out that Dad really wasn't my dad, you know." But anyway, I mean that kind of stuff happened, you know. Oh, Dell sent me top selling stories to get to the next question. Okay, who's up next? Okay, where are we next?
Up here.
Back up here. Thank you, Margaret.
So I would just like to let everyone know who's watching through the live webcast that we are taking questions on Facebook through the Qalipu Applicant Forum, if you want to look it up. So I have 2 questions that have come in that I'll ask one, get you to answer, and then we'll go on to the next one. The first is, myself and daughter received letters in 2013 stating our applications were assessed in accordance with the 2008 agreement, 2013 supplemental agreement, and have the opportunity to self-identify, but did not feel the need, as I am from Flat Bay, St. Teresa's. My father, Roy Young, and most members of my family have their status. With affidavits from my sister and father stating who I am to them and what we love doing when we visit home. And in 2017, we both received our letters of applications were not accepted due to not self-identifying and cannot appeal the decision. Is there anything that can be done in regards to this?
Okay, thank you. Again, another person who's been knocked out of this process because of self-identification with no right to appeal. It's a tough situation. You know, these people, despite their background, their connection to their community, weren't able to provide the self-identification information that was required because they were living away and under a little different set of criteria than those that applied September 22nd, 2011 and earlier. Again, another sad situation that we have to address with Canada. Many people involved in this process are being denied because of a lack of self-identification. Canada may say to me, Brendan, you know, well, the rules are rules and we have an agreement, but we have to talk about this. So right now, I really don't know what to tell this lady in terms of this. She got caught in the self-identification piece here and right now has no right to appeal. That will not change unless Canada decides to change its mind on how we've done that. Okay?
Okay. And then we have one more question. Why was the supplemental agreement agreed to as it stands by the FNI? The FNI was aware that a clarification in definitions would mean self-identification for some people would require an additional burden of proof after September 22nd. And it would also require a more burden of proof for those who had to show they were visiting their communities and practicing their culture. So why was this agreement, or why did the FNI agree to the supplemental agreement knowing that this was going to be the result?
All right, thank you. The supplemental agreement was initiated by the Government of Canada. I don't think it was the FNI. And it came in place out of a concern regarding the large numbers of people that came into this process who no one ever knew existed. It was like some of our own family members didn't know our people existed. But Canada is saying, so many people came in here, we have to do something. And the BAM, remember, the BAM was formed then. We had our founding members list. So I'm suggesting it was a view that anybody who wanted to come into this process late should be able to self-identify by having some involvement in the Aboriginal culture, movement, or otherwise, and that should predate 2008. Who knew at the time what the impact of all of that was going to be in the supplemental agreement? I'll tell you honestly, as I sat around that table into a lot of discussion, some of it not that pleasant sometimes, with the leadership in the day about this whole document of supplemental agreement. It was never easy. No one expected, though, at that table, and I've talked to a lot of them, that 10,512 people would be out of this process potentially. and that all these people involved that made applications, the 60-something thousand that have no right to appeal, we didn't know anything like that was going to happen. Truthfully, as I sat there and talked about what would be the end of this, we figured on a band size between 30 and 35,000. And if it got to be 50, great. You know, that's how we looked at it at the time. Why the supplemental agreement? You know, here's the truth on the supplemental agreement for those that were at the table. A few things. Number one, this is important. You listen to this. Number one, without a supplemental agreement, 75,000 people, as we were told by our leadership, our lawyer, and by Canada, it's over. They fend for themselves and they're gone. On that one note alone, let's say, for example, council decided, or the FNI decided, we're going to save ourselves and our families and our friends, and to hell with those 75,000 people. What do you think people would have said to us who wanted to come into this process? Would that have been fair, you think, in their view? The second thing that happened was this. We were told that Canada, if we didn't have a supplemental agreement, would unilaterally take this process over, and then whatever we got, by God, we were going to get. And the third thing we were told by our leadership and our legal counsel, it is possible that Canada could take this process over and maybe, yes, jeopardize the programs that we had in place at the time that we thought were very good for our people. So those are some of the reasons why the supplemental. I'm not saying it was all right. Looking back at it now, hey, you know, we're here today, 3.5 years later, with an outcome that we know now, but we didn't know then. You know, who knew what this process was going to be? And that's the problem that we face when we're trying to address the supplemental agreement. And today, people, as I said earlier, are telling me walk away. Walk away and destroy 5 decades of hard work and scrapping to try to get recognition. You know, that's a lot for people to ask me to do as your leader. What we have to do, though, is try to make the situation better for those people that right now have letters saying you're going to be out of this process. Number one, we make it better for those people who legitimately should be involved in this process. And there's where we are. So we can look back forever. We have to look forward. And we have to work together going forward, trying to find a way to fix this up. Because right now, this whole process, as evidenced by you here, by the outcry we see across Canada, by the meetings we have in all of our communities so far, people believe this is a messed up process. It's been flawed, so now we have to try to get it straightened up. And that's the next fix that we have to try to work on here. Sherry, Corner Brook lady here.
Corner Brook lady. Hi, I'm Sherry McDonald, and I'm originally from Corner Brook. Spent 22 years there, living in Mount Pearl now.
Sherry, speak up.
Living in Mount Pearl now, and picture of my great-grandmother's on the website, so I guess I'm Aboriginal from that, and I apologize to the people I have my back to. I'm going to focus on the positive and something that, not my own story, but maybe something that might be helpful for all of us. I do want to thank you and your team for the work that you are doing. One of the questions I had when I came here tonight is, what are you going to do with all these concerns and questions we're giving you? And so you've kind of answered that. You're doing everything you can. You're going through every door you can, and maybe some windows too. But so the second question I had was about how you can help those of us who are in the appeal process right now, because that deadline is, you know, coming down the track pretty quickly. And I think there is information that you have that can be useful to us, those of us who are trying to put that together. You've mentioned here tonight that you are going to do up some scenarios. Now, one of the things you said was, well, leave your email address and we'll send it out to you. That's one of my first problems that I have, is some of this information is coming in bits and pieces. I know someone who sent her an email and she sent it to me. I'm not sure why those scenarios couldn't be just sent out the way a general letter is sent out, or a general notification for this meeting. Then people, maybe somebody was sick and couldn't be here tonight, so they don't leave their email, so they don't know what that scenario is. So I would suggest that we start, you know, putting all that information out through the one window. I'm not on Facebook, so there's good information that's coming from these other sites. There's no reason you as a central site can't be taking some of that and sending it to us, you know, so that we're all getting the same information, because we're not. And I'll give you a couple of, in terms of specific things you can do beyond the scenarios, I'll give you a couple of examples of things that I think might be useful. I think one of the most useful things for us is going to be how our applications were assessed, because the the hoop we have to jump through for the appeal process is what mistakes were made in your application and how does your documentation meet the criteria. Now, like it or lump it, we may not like the criteria, we may not like that rule, we may not like anything about it, but that's the hoop we got to jump through. So while the process is the process, let's do the best we can, which is what you're saying. Let's do it. We don't really know how those applications were assessed. The information we have is, you got 3 out of 4 for this, you got 2 out of 4 for that, you got something. When I got that, I said, well, how did they decide what a 1 out of 4 was for frequent visits? How did they decide what a 2 out of 4 was? How did they decide what a 3 out of 4? I keep going, I sound like Smallwood, right? He used to do that repeat thing. So how did they decide that? Because you couldn't just have a bunch of people look at these applications and say, well, boy, I think that's a tree. So what am I going to say? So what am I going to say when I go to do my appeal? Am I going to say to the appeal master, boy, I think this is a 4? I don't know. So, I asked that question of Aboriginal Affairs. They told me to go to the band because the band had a member on that enrollment committee. I went to the band. They said, we'll bring your question forward to the council, which I know they must have done. And then I said, well, I'm not getting an answer. I put in a request for freedom of information under the Federal Access to Information Act, and that's going to work its way through the bowels of some administration. 2019. In the meantime, up comes one of these random emails. Somebody has provided a piece of paper that shows how some of that scoring was done. So some lady who asked for her file, got her file. In that is an assessment document that shows how they decided what a 1 out of 4 is. The lady up there has one. Not everybody has that yet. That is a piece of information that your council could be sending out. And I'll give one example of what's there for folks of you who don't know. One of the hoops that you could have jumped through for communication is that you would have had to prove through documentation weekly contact for 30 weeks out of a 52-week segment. In that 5-year period before 2008, when you're putting in this information in 2014 to have those phone bills. Now, that being said, if I had known that in 2014 when I put in my application, I might have been able to jump through that hoop. But all I knew was they will accept phone bills. So I put in some random ones that showed, I'm having regular contact. But I didn't put in 30 weeks worth because I didn't know that was the hoop. We now have that information. So that's a piece of information you could be sending out. I can't ask you for what I don't know you have. So I know that's a piece of paper that's there. But the person that we had involved in this enrollment process knows all the pieces of paper that were used for this assessment process. Because even on that document that we have now, it's pretty vague how the Mi'kmaq, connection or participation, there's no nice little scale like telephone one. There's nothing there. So we don't really know how that was done. But the person who was involved in that process must know. There must have been some discussion. If we know what that is, maybe when we're talking to the appeal master, we can say something about that. Right. So we don't know what we don't know, but you do. So that's a piece of paper you can give them. The other thing that you could do, and I'll finish up quickly, I know there's lots of other questions, but hopefully this is useful to everybody, is you're going to do scenarios. That's great. But there are some pretty specific situations that people are in. As the participation, participation in the culture in that is a big one. We don't have any information. I had a piece of paper in every single thing, every single category they asked for that. I got 0. 0. So if I knew what it was that they assessed in terms of giving you 1 point out of 9 or 2 points out of 9, you could do those scenarios and tell us. That would be helpful to us because we can't appeal what we don't know was the criteria.
Thank you, Sherry.
We're going to take a question down here, and then Margaret's going to do 2 on this side. I know there's a lot of hands up. There's really no way of knowing whose hands were up first. Should we form lines on either side?
Yeah.
Would that be helpful? Because
we're also taking questions through
Yeah,
live
Janelle,
stream.
if we may.
okay.
Okay, I'm going to try to answer it in part. The Enrollment Committee did follow a process when they assessed your application. If anybody is going to request a copy of their file from INAC, you will see likely the assessment form that the committee used. Some of you will, as was just noted, probably got 0 points for Mi'kmaq Way of Life on the point system, even though you would have submitted documentation for it. The way the committee worked is that they moved through your application in a very specific way, and you had to satisfy certain points along the way. So, for example, they started with whether or not your application was valid. If it wasn't valid, according to the terms of the agreements, they didn't go any further because you didn't satisfy that piece of criteria, which was important. If you did, they moved to the next step in the process, which would have been self-identification. Then they moved to the next piece, which was acceptance. So then when they got to the point system, frequent visits and communication was at the beginning of the point system. You had to get 1 point there. Didn't matter if the point grid went up to 500. If you had 499, you needed that 1 point frequent visits. If you didn't get that, the committee didn't proceed with the assessment of the application. So even though you would have had evidence in your file for Mi'kmaq Way of Life. Yeah, because the system, as I understand it, self-populated your residency, 3 points, and your membership in the FNI, 9 points, or Tatamakok Mi'kmaq Alliance. They were self-populated. The committee didn't have to assess that because they were pretty objective-based pieces of evidence. You either were on the island or you weren't on the island. You either were a member of one of the organizations or you were not. So that's to help you understand the process a little bit. One thing that was also discussed at the implementation committee level, and Canada has agreed to it, it's taking us a little bit of time to do it, but the directives that would have been issued to the enrollment committee will be published on the band's website. We're hoping to have that done in the very near future. So you will be able to get a greater insight into some of the things that happen at that level too.
Thank you, Randy. The supplemental agreement was geared to try to provide some objective approach to assessing all these applications. I'm not saying it was right. Prior to that, there wasn't any objective approach. So, and Canada will argue, honestly, that not much changed with the supplemental agreement. But I have to say this, if all these people are being knocked out of the band and all these people aren't getting in, the supplemental agreement had to do something, didn't it? So the attempt was to bring an objective measure, because these people were assessing 103,000 applications. So they were trying to figure out a way how to do this on a point system. I'm not saying it was the right system, and I'm not defending that system right now because I actually spoke pretty strongly against it at the beginning. But this is a system that was put in place. In terms of Sherry's question about, what was the process used, I have to tell you honestly, when you say to me that I'm familiar with the process, I was not. This was an enrollment activity, and I became chief about 14 months ago. So I wasn't very engaged in that process at all. Even as chief of Qalipu First Nation and president of the FNI, I wasn't involved in being there looking at this stuff. We had a committee referred to as an independent committee set up between Canada and the FNI. There were 12 people in the end, in the last part of that process, with a chairperson, and they did this assessment of what was happening. But for local councillors and me particularly, weren't involved in any way in determining that. What we do get and what we got are the results of all that process, same as you have right now. So I just wanted to share it with you. Next question, please.
Okay, we're going to take a question here, and then we're going to go across the room. And the way it's going to work is we'll go back and forth between question on this side, and an online question because we're starting to fill up. So we do apologize. I'm just a lowly volunteer here trying to pass the mic to people. So I'm sorry if there's a wait for your question.
I don't need a mic.
Don't need a mic? No.
Thank you, Peter. Good to see you, buddy.
Glad you're my first cousin, by the way. I just want to bring something up. I know who I am. I know where I came from. You're all in the same boat. What bothers me is I had to prove to somebody in Ottawa who I am. I had to write all kinds of letters and do all kinds of notes and send all kinds of pictures and all kinds of history. My family, I didn't even care. I applied before 2011. Brennan knows my family. I'm related to the Whites, the Jesso, the Camies, the Glens. All Native people. All had cards. I never really got involved in this until this all started. I done that before 11. It's ridiculous what we had to go through to prove who we are. That some guy up in Ottawa. families have been involved in the wildlife, the outdoors, our culture. And we're having somebody in Ottawa tell us what to do? I was turned down. His grandmother and my grandmother and sister. Give me a break. And it's because if I didn't do all the appeals, I applied before the 2011. I had a file that ticked from the Whites down in Benbosco, and the Jesso, the Canyon, the Glens. You name it. It's unfair what they're doing to us. We got to stand up like Brendan's saying, and we got to fight. My problem is they denied me. Why? I had no idea. But I wish somebody would tell me. And Brendan, I think we should have somebody in St. John's, because there's a fine group of people here, that we can go in and sit down and talk to somebody, and somebody educated. Not saying we're all stupid here, but somebody educated in the laws of what we can do. Because this is ridiculous of what somebody in Ottawa is telling us as Native people what we should do and what we should do, who qualifies and who don't. If our family has the bloodline, I don't care if it's 1%, I don't care if it's 50%, I don't care if it's a goddamn 100. Why should we have to sit here like this and prove who we are?
But how can they argue when we have the proof of our bloodline? Now, how can they argue?
That's what I'm saying. My grandmother was Native. My grandmother was Native. My grandfather was Native. My great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. My grandfather was the first settler in Bosco. He was Native. He married a white from Benbosco. She was Indian. So you tell me where I don't have the bloodline.
That's all should be needed.
You understand what I'm saying?
Already on. Absolutely.
My great-grandfather, the first settler in Bosco. He married an Indian lady from Benbosco. White. They're all Native. So,
okay, everyone. Why do we do this? Why do we let Peter? No, Peter. No, I know. Why do we let Peter finish? Because we're all jumping in and
Yes,
let Peter
please.
have his say.
There are other people that
there's
would love
people
to.
here that's into the same situation I am, which I can understand by looking across this room. They tell me I didn't qualify. How much more do I need? Do I have to pee in a bottle or put a stab on a stick and send it to somebody to tell me who I am? It's not fair. So I want to know, maybe there's like somebody other gate, they turned me down. I want to know why they turned me down. Well, I followed all the directions that he asked me to do. Pictures, history, bloodline. What else can I do? Stand and be hidden speak?
Peter, thank you, Peter. It might be the case you got turned down because you're living in St. John's. Hey, come here.
It doesn't. We're cousins. It doesn't make no difference where you live at. I'm going to say something else.
That you're turned down because you were in St. John's. We have a charter of rights here in Canada.
That's right.
If you were turned down because you were in St. John's, that's discrimination.
And I agree with you 100%.
That's wrong.
That's right.
This whole enrollment process is a farce. It's
no.
dignified for us. What is it for them? I don't know. But it's terrible. We're sitting here discussing these idiots.
Yes.
Who are saying a brother is in, a brother isn't, a mother is, a father isn't. This is ridiculous.
I got two more things to say. If you're an African American and you're in Africa and you come here as a doctor or you're pushing hamburgers at McDonald's, you are what? You're an African American. If you're an East Indian or a Mexican and you're pushing hot dogs off the McDonald's, you are what?
Mexican.
Do they have to prove that they're Mexican?
No.
All I got to say.
Thank you, Peter. All right.
I'm his son. What does this mean, this Mi'kmaq way of life? Most Newfoundlanders who don't even have Mi'kmaq blood are hunters, fishers, catching rabbits, everything else. What does that mean? I really feel that the Qalipu Mi'kmaq people, your organization should focus on this as a discriminatory act under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, under our behalf.
Thank you. If I may, can you hear me okay? Because I'm not hearing myself very well. Is
Yes,
the microphone
we can
working?
hear you.
Thank you very much. Well, let me say this about that. I believe that there are groups that are going to take this up based on the Charter of Rights and human rights. So that will happen. I don't know how long it's going to take for that case to be pieced together. My position is this. I'm here to support Aboriginal people, to support Mi'kmaq people.
But isn't that part of your support to say that all these disenfranchised people here
Yes.
are the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that we live under has been infringed? Can you express that, or is that?
I'll certainly pass that view on. I'm in a meeting in Ottawa on Friday, and of course I'm going to tell that story and many other things that I know, many things that I've learned in the last week traveling to all these communities. I understand that.
It's a reality.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Next.
I'd just like to say a few words before this lady speaks.
Yes, thank you,
and that
Margaret.
is that, we have to take some accountability in that we are allowing Ottawa to tell us who we're not. It's up to us to tell Ottawa who we are and to speak up on our own behalfs. And it's up to you as our chief
Thank you.
to be passionate about it. We're not going away. We've been here for centuries.
Thank you, Margaret.
Centuries. We're not going anywhere. So we need you, Chief Mitchell, to go, I understand that you are president of the FNI, but you are our chief, first and foremost.
Thank you, and that's right. Exactly.
I've written, incidentally, to my MP. I've written to the Prime Minister of Canada and every opposition member. I haven't had a reply, but I'm in hope.
Well,
I'm an optimist.
thank you very much. No, keep that stuff up. Thank you for your comments.
All right, I got a couple of questions here. So I was a member with the FNI about in 2006. Now I don't meet the qualifications on the point system because of 1 point. And I got a question for the appeal. I was lucky enough to get an appeal, but it says no additional documentation is to be provided to or will be considered by the appeal master. So what am I writing on? They have everything I've given them. Unfortunately, I didn't realize that I needed to keep receipts of how many times I visit my grandparents, how many times I went to St. Albans. I didn't think I needed to do that, and now all of a sudden, I'm out.
Thank you. This is an important idea or concept she's raised here. We're allowed to be in an appeals process, but we're not allowed to add anything at this point. So, about that process, I have to talk to the firm involved in this thing in the end to impress on them the importance of digging deep. Do not skim this stuff. But yeah, would you expect in an appeal process to be able to provide some information or evidence? Sadly, we're caught up in the terms of an agreement. But we spent 2 hours a day, with the Premier's office talking a lot about what you just said, about the appeals process, how come we can't add additional information. So I have to go back and impress upon these people in Canada, right at the minister's level, and the Prime Minister, if I can get to him, to tell them that people are concerned that this appeals process is not allowing them to do anything. So if we can't put anything else in our files, what do you expect we're going to get out of an appeals process? Probably not a lot. Unless someone made a mistake or an error or misunderstood something you gave them already, or it was under a piece of paper and they didn't see it. I can impress upon the law firm to make sure they dig deep. They deep dive here to get down to why this person, especially this lady, suggests you have 12 points on your card. All right, well, I can tell you, I'm going to be pushing for you to get in this band. Don't you worry about that.
Good. Can you push for me, too?
Okay, guys.
All right, okay. Next.
Can we have some quietness? We have to keep this as peaceful as possible. And when everybody is talking, it's impossible to hear what other people are saying. So if everyone could just speak one at a time, that would be awesome. Thank you.
These people maybe.
Okay, so we're going to take one more question online and then get back to the physical lineup. We have a question here. It starts with an excerpt from the Indian Act. It says, protests. It is possible to protest either a removal, omission, or addition of a name to the Indian Register. Protests must be submitted to the registrar in writing within 3 years from the date of the registrar's decision. The registrar then reviews the protest along with the original file and any new documentation to determine if the original decision was correct. Once the registrar has made a decision on the protest, the affected person is notified. If the person concerned disagrees with the registrar's decision, he or she can take the matter to court. So the question that comes is, if for some reason that a person is denied that was already a status holder and founding member loses their appeal, will they be able to protest the decision made directly with INAC? And then he said, as per the
Thank you.
quote.
Well, it sounds like to me that the Indian Act has a provision. What are we saying in this document, though, in the supplemental agreement? It basically says, and you've got letters already back, that the decision of the appeal master, for those people that can appeal, the decision of the appeal master is final. That appears to be contrary to what we're hearing from the Indian Act. So we have to look to this in the Indian Act, I believe. So there is an opportunity later on.
He asked, you are going to be in Ottawa on Friday. He would like that brought to
Yes,
Ottawa.
I will. Thank you very much.
And
Randy, did
right
you
here.
get a note of what that question was? Okay, that has to do with I made the comment that the appeal master and the appeals decision would be final, but the Indian Act says that a person has, by way of an appeal to the Indian Registrar, 3 years following a decision to make an appeal and can add additional documentation in that appeals process. So we may have an inconsistency here we need to talk about. I'd like to share something with you, though, that I forgot to tell you earlier on. Many of you, because you're not from here originally, many of you may have parents that are still part of this process, that are what we call Section 6-1 Indians right now. They hold a status card. So I'm just explain this to you. This is very important. So as children of a person who is a 6-1 Indian, a Section 6-1 Indian, if you get denied in this process, you can make an appeal under your parent's name to be what's called a Section 6.2 Indian, and you cannot be denied. All right? So here's the problem, though, that many people have with being a Section 6.2 Indian. You can't be left out. This is true. This is the Indian Act. If you are a 6.2 Indian, though, and you're married to a non-Aboriginal person, your children do not get the benefits of this program passed on. They're out. People say to me, I'm really interested in this for my grandchildren, particularly education. But if a person gets not to be a 6, or you lose your status, as many of you have letters suggesting that you had your hands up earlier today, you can still be part of the Qalipu process and become a status Indian in Canada under your 6-1 parent, and you cannot be denied. I'm actually working on a process right now with the Government of Canada to fast-track those people. I won't get into all the details yet because it's not final, but to fast-track these people into this process as 6-2s so that you never even see loss of your card or your benefits at all. If you are fast-tracked in this process, you still have a right to appeal if you want to try to become a 6-1 Indian like your parent. All right? But if that doesn't go for you, you're still in. But understand this, as a 6-2, and if you are married, or some of you aren't married and will marry a non-Aboriginal person, and you have a child, these programs and the status card and the benefits are over for your children. All right? I want you to understand that clearly. This is an important thing. So it's not over even if you don't get your status. But remember, your parent has to be alive or was alive when they received status in 2011 on September 22nd. Okay? So that's an important piece. So there is an opportunity for people, children of parents who are 6-1. Okay? I want you to understand that. Also, if a 6'2 Aboriginal person, a Section 6.2, marries another 6.2 Aboriginal person, when the children are born, they go right back to 6'1 again. They get a higher status. Okay? So this is an important thing to understand. We have information on our website that tells this story and how it all works. So it's not over for you if you lose your card and your parent, either of your parents is a status 6'1", Section 6.1 Indian in Canada under the Indian Act. Everybody clear on that? So it's not over if you don't get this card or you lose this card. You have a chance to come back into this process. And I'm working on a way to keep you in this process without you having to do anything. I want Canada to automatically convert you. Go ahead. Absolutely. If you have a right to appeal, please appeal. Don't stop and say, oh, Brendan Mitchell is going to take care of it. I'm going to do what I can to take care of it, but get your appeals in. And we're going to come in behind you or with you with an appeal on your behalf also if you have that right to appeal. Okay? But do your thing also. Next question. I think we're in the aisle here right now. Sorry, sir. We'll come back to you.
So I was status and then lost it actually for
Your mic come on, please.
not having the community connections. To provide a bit of backstory, I was born and raised in St. John's. I've done an Aboriginal Studies minor. I'm now working on a master's degree that's looking at this whole situation. So that's, it's been a sense of absences that has really guided me when in doing an Aboriginal Studies minor between 2005 and 2009. It was the lack of information that really stood out to me. Which leads me to the question of what process was used, what data was gathered to determine what designated communities were. Was there a population density requirement? Was it archival? Was there people in geography consulted? Was it archival search?
All right, if I may, I'm going to give this one to Randy Drover. I could answer some of your questions, but Randy was there when this process was going on in the early days before the agreement in principle was put in place. So Randy, how were these communities determined?
Okay, so just to be clear, you're talking about the Annex B communities, right? The contemporary Mi'kmaq communities, there are about 67 of them?
Within designated wards.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
so as I understand it, the Federation of Newfoundland Indians was basically the culmination of 9 bands, and they were in Flat Bay, St. George's, Stephenville, etc. Those 9 bands represented, well, they had jurisdictions, and within their jurisdictions were several communities. Like I was a member of the Spildeck First Nation, and my band represented Bishop Falls, Botwood, Peterview, Leading Tickles, that kind of thing. Those communities got rolled up into Annex B. As I understand it, they reflected the total jurisdiction of the 9 bands and the Federation of Newfoundland Indians at the time.
Okay, just in some of the searching and work that I've done, I think there are absences and gaps where communities may have been overlooked.
And I won't dispute that, but I'm just explaining to you how the logic behind how those Annex B communities were determined.
Yeah. Another question actually that I had was, I realize this is going to be a long-going process. We've got to stay positive. But moving forward, what level of representation can we expect to see for people who maybe end up falling within the non-status category once this process is all over and done with? Will there be implementation of something such as a representative for people outside the band wards and non-status?
All right, if I may, I'm going to get Odell to talk to this one. You mentioned people that aren't in will be basically non-status. Odell, what should people do you think? And I'm thinking now, Mi'kmaq First Nation Assembly here. Can you tell people what you think?
I wasn't listening to the question because I was...
No, the question had to do with what if people fall out of status and become basically non-status? Where should they go? What they should do to get help and so forth?
Okay.
Let me put this down a little bit for you. What's that? I'm going to reach way up there.
First of all, everybody who has the right to appeal needs to do that. That's the priority, okay? And it would be good, there was a lady already mentioned it, you need to have your file. So for those of you who didn't already request your file, I suggest that you do it right away. And the number is the same number that I gave you before, 1-800-561-2266. It's important when you're writing your appeal, like in the second paragraph of your letter, it states what their decision is. So that's what you have to argue, okay? A lot of you will probably have in this area residency because most of you were already members of a band, which gave you 9 points, and you should have all gotten 3 points for living in Newfoundland, right? So they're probably docking you on residency. Now, for some people that I know, they never sent in, when the supplementary letters came out in 2013, because you had your application in before 2011, because you were already members of the band, and because you were a member of an F&I band or 3 or 4 of the other bands that were mentioned, a lot of people didn't send any proof of residency. So that's where you got docked. So in your appeals, you'll see it in the letter that we put out today, in one of the samples. In one of the sections, it's 4-2-9. Is that the directive or the annex? No, but is it the annex or the... Okay, in the agreement in principle, under 4-2-9, it states there that if there is discrepancies in the file, that the enrollment committee could have called to settle whatever issue that was. I've never heard of anybody getting called from anybody in the enrollment committee to get access to that other pieces of paper that's needed for your file. So you can argue the issue there under that 4.2.9.
Odell, if I may, the question was, as a non-status person, where would he go? This connects to the Mi'kmaq First Nation Assembly. I think you do.
For those of you who were not members of a band before, I am advising everybody to join the Mi'kmaq First Nations Assembly of Newfoundland. Now I have their phone number here. And these are the people that are going to be fighting for you in court. The number is 1-709-388-6362. Now their office is very busy now, so if you get a busy signal or not an answer, just keep calling. If you want to, you can also go on their website and you can log in and register. Okay, the abbreviation is M as in mother, F as in Frank, N as in Nancy, A as in Apple, N as in Nancy. And the organization is the Mi'kmaq First Nations Assembly of Newfoundland. And they're the group that did the court case for the two people for not residency, for not having a long-term birth certificate and not being signed, and won. So because of that, 6,500 people, as applications were reassessed. So they're already in proceedings of doing the court case. What they want you to do, on their Facebook page, there is, under files, you'll see an authorization form. So you can download that or take a copy. I have a copy here. I actually only have 2 copies with me, but if anybody wants to take it and photocopy it and give it to anybody, what they want you to do is fill this out and then send them a copy of your letter. But that's your best recourse right now, is to join that. And not only the people who don't have their cards, people who do have their cards, because litigation is going to cost them a lot of money. And they've already got a quote. It's anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000. So that's a lot of money to raise. So the $20 that they're charging for membership will go towards that. And it's not a big price to pay, because if you had to take this to court by yourself, the first 2 the cases that we took to court back 2 years ago or 3 years ago cost $84,000. And that was nowhere, it was very simple. So everybody join if they can.
Thank you, Adele.
Okay.
Everyone, I'm prepared to keep going all night, by the way. You okay? Everybody good?
This gentleman would like to ask a question.
My flight is at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, so we're okay. Let's keep going here.
Not mine, I'm hungry.
I got something to read here. I haven't got my letter yet, and I've called that 2266 countless times. But I got a letter here dated November 5th, 2009. Your application to be enrolled as a founding member of the Qalipu Mi'kmaq First Nations Band has been considered by the Enrollment Committee. Committee finds you do meet the criteria enrolled as a founding member of the Qalipu Mi'kmaq First Nation, pursuant to terms and agreements of governing the formation of your application and enrolling as a founding member of the Qalipu Mi'kmaq Nation Band, hereby approved. Please note, decisions of the Enrollment Committee may be appealed by the Government of Canada, the Federation of Newfoundland Indians, and party in agreement to form the Qalipu Mi'kmaq First Nation Band. Both parties will be notified of the Enrollment Committee's decision. Should either party decide to appeal, must do so within 30 days of mailing this letter. If an appeal is made, the Enrollment Committee will notify you. If the appeal is not taken within 30 days, the mailing of the decision of this committee will be final and binding. Tom Rideout.
All right. What this gentleman What this gentleman is reading is what I call the Tom Rideout letter. About
Is-
30
so
about
am I good?
3,200 people got that letter. And what happened, though, I made a request back in the day for have these people to get a card immediately. They ended up back in the pot with the 75,000 to go through an appeals thing again. And many of these people, unfortunately, that got that letter, got another letter recently saying, you've been denied. Everywhere we go, someone says to me, Canada had 30 days to appeal this, and they didn't. Legal and binding is what you all heard, and when you got your card, that was written right in the agreement, I believe. So what happened, though, the supplemental agreement now appears to have come in and superseded everything that was written in that letter. And you know, I know, thank you, it said legal and binding, you're absolutely right. This is another issue that I'll have on the table on Friday with Canada when I meet him in Ottawa. But I know what the answer may be. The supplemental agreement came on and kind of changed the way that interpretation was to be done. And that's probably where we are with that. But you particularly got the Tom Rideout letter, and you ended up being lumped in to the 75,000 people who came in this late. It's sad, really, that 3,200 of you thereabouts never got a card when you should have got it. Pardon me?
2009.
Oh, I know. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I grew up in Benoit's Cove. My grandmother, Bride Hackett, was part of the Benoit's Cove Indian Band with Wilson Sands. I moved out here in 2000 to work with my son. I sent in information as requested. My parents, we've got our letters back. My parents in Benoit's Cove, they've got their status. My sisters in Corner Brook, they've got their status. Yep. Myself and my brother here didn't. I sent the same information. My son was almost 18 at the time when I sent in the information. We got our letters back. I opened mine first. I was rejected. I got 6 points. I don't know how. I opened his because it said care of me, and he wasn't home. I asked him, I said, can I open it? You probably got rejected too. His was approved. It didn't mention anything about points. It doesn't make sense at all.
Well, that's an interesting story. In your case, you're living in St. John's, and you were assessed by the point system, and your parents were, okay? And your parents were not, I'm sorry. And they got approved based on a different set of criteria or system than you did. You were on the point system because you didn't live in an Aboriginal community.
But my son who lives in my home.
At the time you applied.
Yeah.
Your son applied under you, or did he apply under his father?
My son applied under me. We sent in the same information because he wasn't quite 18 when I sent in the information.
Who can help me with this? Yeah, why don't you do this? Why don't you drop down after, and we'll, instead of taking everybody's time to try to figure out what sounds to be a complicated situation, or maybe it's not.
I got 6 points and he was
accepted. Because I'd like to bring that case to Ottawa also. So what we're finding as we go along in all these community meetings are a tremendous number of possible errors or anomalies that are becoming far too frequent for us right now.
I've got another cousin who lives here as well.
Yep.
She has 4 children.
Right.
So her oldest son was accepted. Her twin girls were accepted. She was rejected. Her youngest daughter was rejected.
I'm not
Same
sure.
information.
Well, thank you for bringing it up. But I don't know how all of that happened. But we have to talk with you to see, because this is a really interesting case story that we need to talk about and bring forward. Again, you know,
I can appeal.
A lot of mistakes made, a lot of anomalies made. I don't understand this. I'll share this one with you, though, you know, and I'm not saying this is your case by any means. But people get pretty passionate sometimes in a meeting like this, and they say to us, we have one gentleman recently on the West Coast. He stood up there and he said, I can't understand it. He said, my 2 children got in this band. And I'm not saying this is your story up here in the pink and black, here, this lady. But he got up in a meeting and he had everybody, I mean, spellbound by the story that he told about how his children got a card. His 2 children didn't, he didn't. And I'm shaking my head, you know, and scratching a bit of dandruff, probably saying, what the hell could have happened here? Randy met with him after to find out the real story. His children came in under his wife, and he wasn't Aboriginal. So these are some things we're finding. I'm not saying that's your story. I'm really not.
Both my parents got status on separate sides of the family.
One of the consolations for you is this, though, in terms of yourself. You know, you can become a 6'2", you know, status Indian here, but it doesn't help your children. And I know the interest is what? We're always interested in helping our children. No, some of them are in and some aren't, is what I heard here. And I'm thinking also about the sister or the cousin you said that had children, some are in and some are out.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about that story, how it worked, but we'll talk about it after, see if we can figure it out for you. Next question, please.
Yeah, it's common.
Danielle.
Wow.
Great visual.
Well, thank you for doing that. That was a good illustration. It tells me, you know, how messed up we are right now and how we've impacted children within the same family. And again, I'll get to the idea of divisiveness. We never should be about divisiveness. We should be about inclusion. So right now we have a brother with a card and a sister maybe with not, and maybe they're a bit upset with each other because of that. You know, we're doing this right to siblings right now. So this is a situation we have to try to work through. And I got to tell you, I hope Canada's a little more compassionate in this whole
Excuse me
process than they've been to
again.
date.
Randy is trying to capture all of this, and it's very difficult to listen when there's so many conversations going on. So if everybody could just be respectful and just the person who's speaking, that would be great.
Who's next?
Okay, I have one little question before Danielle goes to live stream. When did we start getting points? What is the point system? Like, I'm Native, I'm Mi'kmaq, so who put me on a point system? Like, I'm 54 years old. Who designated a point system?
Yep.
I don't understand when that came in.
It was an agreement between Canada and the FNI out of a means to determining somehow objectively who should be in this group. And that's how it happened. It was an agreement between Canada and the FNI at the time.
Shameful.
Yep.
All right.
What kind of power do you think you have that you can determine the ancestry of people? Like in my case, I got 3 brothers who are in the band, 2 sisters who are in the band, all kinds of nephews and nieces who are in the band. I was one of the founding members. I joined the Indian headband in Stephenville over 20 years ago, and I'm rejected simply because of my address. Now, who in the hell gave anybody the power to say that because you haven't got an address, by those terms, if you move to St. John's, you're out of luck. You're going to be out of the band.
Yep.
Because you're not going to be an Indian.
Understand? Thank you.
Okay.
The gentleman raises an interesting question about ancestry. I want to tell you all this is not just about ancestry. In fact, ancestry is the last thing that's been looked at in this process right now. Maybe it should have been the first.
It should have been the first.
And so again, it's not just about ancestry, unfortunately. Maybe it should be first.
It was just about
that's
ancestry
not-
before
but
the
that's not what's put
supplementary
in place here,
agreement.
you know. So it's a good question. Randy? I didn't hear what you said.
Yeah.
Hi.
I just want to clarify that because you had said it wasn't just about ancestry until supplement, or you were making the suggestion that it was only ancestry initially.
Not only, but
Right.
that was involved.
Yeah, I just
and
want
all
to
of a
make
sudden, that's not one of the main issues, right?
No, but I do want to make it clear that the agreement in principle, the initial document that was ratified by the FNI membership, the criteria stayed the same with supplemental. Things changed in terms of how the criteria was being applied, but ancestry, self-identification, connection to the Mi'kmaq group of Indians, that was all there initially.
Oh, and that was the same people that come up with the brilliant point system, right? Was that? Am I correct? Was that the same team of people that came up with the a different group?
It may have been some of the same people for sure.
Okay.
But Randy makes a good point. In the beginning, it was never just about ancestry, because maybe everybody in Newfoundland could probably make a connection back to some ancestor in Bay St. George or somewhere like that. But it was about more things, as he mentioned, connection to a community,
Absolutely.
being involved in things Mi'kmaq within the community. Those were the only things that were being looked at. But what happened with the supplemental agreement, Margaret, was this. It was believed that someone could better define how a person could be objectively assessed by way of a point system. I'm not saying it's right.
No,
but I'm
I
saying
understand.
That's the system was put in place, you know.
But I really had to voice that because that is a huge source of contention.
Sure it is, of course. Yeah.
Respectfully.
And we're feeling that everywhere we go today, and we know about that. You know, it's a tough situation. Pardon me? None of them. No. And there were no people either. I mean, no people on the committee who were involved in that process that live in Halifax, Toronto, Fort McMurray, Vancouver, and all these places. Or none were there from St. John's either. Yes. Next question.
Danielle.
So I'm going to take one from online, and then we're going to jump back to the line again. So myself and my mom were members of the Indian Head Band in the FNI, but we did not get our acceptance letter from the Indian Head Band until November 2008. So we did not get any of the 9 points for maintenance of the Mi'kmaq culture and way of life. Is there anything that can be done for this?
Unfortunately, the criteria requirements that people use that show as evidence of meeting these things all had to predate June of 2008. So if these people were members of the band later in 2008, that information wasn't applicable in this process.
So
because the information that Canada was looking for and the FNI as part of this agreement could not be of recent vintage. For example, people say to me, well, I was at the powwow in 2012 and I went back in 2013. Isn't that enough? Sadly, though, it's not, because you had to demonstrate or let someone know you're at a powwow prior to 2008. Powwow may not be a great example because powwows aren't that old. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, Flat Bay is celebrating 11 years of powwow in 2018. So this is the problem that we're facing. Guys, I'm not saying that this was an easy process, but it became a harder process for those people who weren't involved in an Aboriginal community. As Randy said, it wasn't just about ancestry. It was about connection to a community. It was about being accepted by that community, that you were part of the community. You know? Pardon me? And now you may be accepted in the community, but in terms of what's been asked for in the evidence, you know, asked to be supplied, you had to show that you were part of that community then. A good question. Why did they give us a card before all the applications that were in 2012 in November? I don't know. The band was formed by an order in council when the minister went forward with a list of people that should be in. Then there was another bunch of people that came after that, up to November of 2012, that made applications in this process. And yes, in everybody's eyes and everybody's view, they're probably treated a little differently, and yeah, maybe a little harder. Because someone may argue, and not me, but someone may argue, if they were involved and wanted to be involved, why did they not do it sooner? Okay. You know, that's a fair comment. That's a fair comment. Okay, microphone, please. Right here, next question.
Oh, actually, Margaret is just going to take it for 1 second.
Busy girl on Friday.
It's my turn, I guess.
It's
a pleasure to hear you. It's a pleasure to hear you, Chief Mitchell, and I don't envy your position.
Thank you, sir.
Being wearing two hats at the same time, representing the Federation of Newfoundland Indians, which is a party to the federal government's
right. Thank you for saying that.
I'm sorry, but so that puts you in a bit of a conflict, and I appreciate that, and with the greatest of respect, but. You know, and I appreciate the emotionalism that we hear here today. My mother is from St. George's, and so I'm Mi'kmaq through her lineage, as is this row of people right here. But, you know, what's the action plan is my question to you. And I would propose, first of all, that we got to stop this train. This train is out of control, and it's running, and we're running out of time. Now, I would suggest that we immediately, through legal counsel, which you're going to have to put in order, not wearing your hat as an NFI, but your other hat, as a member of the Mi'kmaq people, you're going to have to, in my opinion, apply to the federal court for a stay of action on this matter. The rest of what we're talking about, the gentleman that spoke earlier about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. I got it right here, but I won't take your time to read it right now.
Okay.
But mobility is a sacred, absolute sacred right of us as Canadians. And because we move out of St. George's or that area or any other Mi'kmaq community in Newfoundland to seek employment. I was in Labrador when I applied for membership in the Federation of Newfoundland Indians and was told, oh, you're in Labrador, you don't qualify, because Labrador is somehow off the map. But there are lots of Aboriginal people in Labrador. But in any event, the first thing I think that you have to do is apply for a stay to the federal court, not to the Supreme Court of Canada, but that's where this is going to end up. Yep. And you've got to be in this for the long run, people. You can't expect that this is going to be over in 6 months. It is not. But it'll be over in less than 6 months if we don't get a stay, if we don't put the brakes on the government and the Newfoundland Federation of Newfoundland Indians from going ahead and excluding all of us from this particular action. And it'll happen by default. But you've got to get on board. You've got to pay your $20. You've got to get involved in that association so that there can be a war fund set up. Without that, and $400,000, you're going to be into well over $1 million in legal fees before this is over. But it's worth it. But you've got to. We just can't just sit back and say, well, my grandfather was this, and I'm a Jackatar. I was born in Stephenville Crossing. So. And I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth, but I've got children, and they've been disenfranchised as well.
Your sisters too?
So get that application before the federal court, first of all, to get a stay and stop this train from rolling further.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right, we're going to jump back to...
That was an interesting comment. Let me say something. This is important that I comment to this one. Unfortunately for me, as president of the FNI, I'm in a very, very tough place in terms of what I can do and say to Canada. I'm effectively, legally, putting a stay in place and causing a lawsuit against ourselves. I'm being honest with you here. The Mi'kmaq First Nation Assembly or some other group has to get organized to do that. And it's happening, and I have no problem with that, As a person involved with the FNI, yeah, I'm going to be in court, and the FNI is going to be sued by somebody. But understand, I can't sue myself in this process because there are a lot of other repercussions that are going to happen to all of us and our band if I do that. You're asking me here right now to jeopardize the very fabric of Qalipu First Nation by doing that. And right now, I just can't do it. And I'm being honest with you. But other people had to take this scrap up. Maybe you here organize yourself. We mentioned the Mi'kmaq First Nation Assembly. Yes, we know we're going to court against the FNI in Canada. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's another organization, you people in St. John's, about to lose your cards. What's wrong with you getting together and doing something yourselves? To have a say in this.
And Chief, I do appreciate the conflict that you find yourself in.
Thank you.
But you are in a conflict of interest, and that's unfortunate.
Yep.
And the implementation, that supplemental agreement, that's why we're all in the situation that we're in right now. That supplemental agreement ought not to have been proceeded with. Now, and I'm not sure, but I never ever got notification that we were going to have this meeting on the supplementary agreement. And Section 10 of the Indian Act says that a band may assume control of its own membership if it establishes membership rules for itself in writing in accordance with this section, and if, after the band has been given appropriate notice of its intention to assume control of its own membership, a majority of the electors of the band gives its consent to the band's control. Never happened.
Thank you.
Never happened.
What section was that again?
Section 10.1.
All right, let me tell you if I may.
Well, let me finish, please. Section 10.2 said a band may, pursuant to the consent of a majority of the electors of the band, after it has given appropriate notice of its intention to do so, establish membership rules for itself.
Thank you.
And B, provide for a mechanism for reviewing decisions on membership. So that I never got notice, and I suspect nobody in this room got a chance to vote on that clause.
Well, that situation regarding the supplemental agreement and lack of anybody getting an opportunity to vote on that, that's a very legal conversation that's going to happen because some people, like you suggested, that FNI members at the time, by the way, at the time that vote was taken, yeah, they weren't all of the old FNI people. The only people left based on an AGA, referendum, or bylaw, they would only be the people who were the directors of the FNI. So there was no FNI. The FNI intent was to be gone. But it's only in place, and we talk about it today because we still had this agreement that's not finished, okay? I'd like to explain something to you about Section 10. Our band, when it's all over, if our people are willing to do this, could get into a referendum to accept people through the band under Section 10. But here's the problem with Section 10. Those people that we take in, maybe we take in the whole works of 75,000. Under Section 10 of the Indian Act, there are no benefits for those people. You become a member only by way of a card, but you get nothing physically, no benefits, medical, dental, eye care, education, savings of taxes on vehicles and stuff like that. So the benefits that you get as a Section 10 Indian are none, other than the fact you're on a band list and you may be able to vote in an election. This is why Section 10 is not that attractive to many people, because there's nothing in Section 10 that will allow this gentleman or this lady to get any benefits from the band. And that's the truth on Section 10. So I want you to understand that. For me? Thank you. You could be recognized. All right? And if the will of the people sometime down the road, and this would have to be after we get this band formed, because I don't know yet who's going to be in it entirely, we could look at something like that. But understand, if we went to the route of Section 10, there's nothing into it benefit-wise for the Section 10 members of our band, other than the fact they're on a band list, and yes, in an election they will get to vote. At least then you'd have a say into what would happen going forward. But as a Section 10, forever, you'd have no benefits in this process. Okay? Thank you for that. Are you a lawyer by any chance? Okay, thank you. No, I thought you made a great presentation and you made sense in what you said. And I like people, thank you. Hey. All right, next question over here. This guy's a warrior. I know this man. He's from the West Coast. How are you doing?
Hello, I demand the floor, by the way.
There you go.
I demand the floor. Okay. My question is, the 6-1 generation, does that have to be, like, my grandfather is the one who I get my heritage from. He's not here right now. He's actually passed away. But
I know
his great-grandfather...
I helped bury him.
Yeah. But his great-grandfather, I think it was his great-grandmother, I think is where I think she's the full blood in the bloodline. I just wonder, what kind of status do I qualify for, or do I qualify for any status at all?
Are you a status member right now?
No, I'm not a status member.
Is your father, is Paul a status member?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know too much about it, but I did get the application form to apply for status.
And what did the application answer say?
The application, we never sent it off because, well, where I got a disability, like, I gotta have like a parent to proxy for me.
Yes, I understand.
So like, that's why I've been kind of putting it off for a while.
Yep.
So I'd like to get some assistance in filling it out sometime.
Okay, thank you. If I may, one of the problems we have right now, and this gentleman is caught up in this situation, there is no way to apply to Qalipu First Nation right now. The process was over in terms of applications on November 30th in 2012. So right now, everybody applied. No one else came in after. No one else can come into this process right now. Maybe after we get the ban finally settled, we'll look at what we're going to do, either by way of what this gentleman referred to over here in terms of Section 10 or some other means. There's nothing, though, stopping a person to applying to Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada to try to become a status person in Canada. But I will tell you this is a very difficult process. Aboriginal children in other provinces of Canada, grandchildren, for example, can't even get status themselves, you know, and because it's a two-generation thing. You know, after 2 generations, it's kind of over. And I was at a meeting recently, as I mentioned earlier, with the Atlantic Policy Congress in Dartmouth, and that came up, and a woman said to me, one of the chiefs there, you people, she said, can go back 7 generations, but we can't. It's 2 generations for us. And we have young children dark-eyed and dark-haired can't get a status card in this band, and they're our children because their program is different. These are reserve people, and they can't go all the generations back that we have. But remember this, and I explained this to her too. This was a one-shot deal to fix something that happened or never happened in 1949. And this is why today government has opened this process up to everybody that could be involved. But what we're finding right now is that inclusiveness really never worked out for everybody in this process. And here's where we are. So it is different for people on reserve, for example, and others. One thing I'll tell you about reserves, though, this is an important comment. I know of a band. I know of many bands in Nova Scotia. There are about 13 large groups, reserves, and so forth. And these bands have people that live on the reserve, and they have members though that don't live on the reserve. Okay, but they're members. So nobody's taking their card back because they're not living in Acadia or Member 2 or Millbrook and all these other reserve locations, Eskazoni in Nova Scotia. But we're doing a bit different situation for us right now, aren't we? So now government has consideration for taking status cards back. But they don't take them back from these other people. Now, people do lose their cards, though, in Canada. The Indian Registrar told me that I have taken cards back from people for a number of reasons. But I said to her, nowhere ever in the history, unprecedented, and maybe never in the future, would ever such an attempt be made to take cards back from 44.5% of our current band. In other words, 10,512 people. At the time, I didn't know the number when I had that conversation, but whatever number it was, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, this is unprecedented. Nobody has ever done this before. Nobody's ever attempted to do what we're trying, what may happen right now. So I'll make that clear to you. So getting status in an Indian band, particularly a reserve band, a First Nations band in Canada, honestly, is not that easy a process as you may think. And other bands say it's way harder for us than what's happening in Newfoundland. But again, for me, this is a one-shot deal to try to make it right. Truthfully, though, it sounds like from listening to all of you, we haven't made it very right yet, have we? No. Right, I know. Thank you. So we're going to try to get something done with this. Let's take another question, please.
So I'm actually going to try and clarify a question that was asked earlier. I think I might have understood it, but I know it definitely wasn't answered because I think it was misunderstood. For people who are non-status after this process is finished, or is there going to be any resources for them to maintain or reconnect with their culture despite the fact that they're not being recognized under the Indian Act?
Well, thank you. Let me say this. As I talked to you earlier, we only got a piece of plastic that defined us 5 or 6 years ago. And people participated then, so guess what? We can still participate now. Don't let that destroy, this card or lack of it, destroy your interest in your culture, your teachings, and your participation in your heritage. Please, don't do that. Everybody will lose if we do that. We've had a reawakening in Newfoundland, haven't we, in the last number of years? That reawakening is evidenced by all you people here today as Mi'kmaq people coming out to this meeting. You're concerned. So let's not that piece of plastic or whatever comes or doesn't come out of it stop us from being involved. And Qalipu First Nation welcomes everybody to participate in whatever is happening in our communities. Culturally, whether it's a workshop on basket making, the moccasins, to a ceremony regarding the pipe or the drum, and, all these kinds of things. Water ceremonies, sunrise ceremonies, and dancing. We should be doing all of that.
Thank you. I will take another question from online since that was just a clarification. My name is Greg Prescian. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce that right. I was born in St. Teresa's. As a young child, I was taken out of my community by the government and put into a foster home, an orphanage, through no fault of my own. I do not know my past, but I know that I'm Indian. I was told that I cannot appeal because I do not know my past. Is that fair? And what makes your blood different than mine?
Okay.
It's Greg Prejean.
Good question. I don't know Greg's case entirely. I'm suggesting that he could be like what happened in this country, referred to the 60 Scoop. Have you ever heard of it? All right. I'm not sure if he was one of those children, but he was put in probably a foster home. And a lot of people like Greg in this country were taken out of their homes. they were put in residential schools. You know, I had the opportunity to be in Shubenacadie just recently to visit the locations of where these things are. And of course, I've read books on it, you know, about what happened, the eyewitness stories. And yeah, maybe he was taken away like that. So how do we get these people reconnected? Because remember, the approach that Canada took back in the day was, how do we knock the Indian out of the child? And this is how they were doing it. They weren't allowed to speak their language. They weren't allowed to practice their culture. They weren't actually allowed in these orphanages. And I read the Shubenacadie story. Isabel Knockwood wrote a very good book about that, if you get a chance to read it. Brothers and sisters in the same school weren't even allowed to associate very much together. Okay? So how would you keep your culture? And they, you know, sneakily, they practiced their language and worked on their language when they got a bit of time together among themselves, but they were punished if they were caught doing that. So all these kind of things, you know, and in terms of this gentleman here, Mr. Prejean, whatever happened to him sounds like a sad story. How does he find out who he was now? The only thing I can suggest, he has to get back to all his records as an adopted child. He should have a right at this point to figure out who he came from and who were his biological parents. That's the way he makes a trail back, you know. And I'm not sure the answer to his entire solution, but he has to work on finding out, you know, where he came from in that regard. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chief Mitchell. I have another gentleman in the same situation, and we may have lost our talk, but we haven't lost our spirit, and our talk is coming back.
Do you have a card? Yeah, my name is Wayne Jessel.
Wayne, speak.
I was put out for fostered when I was born, and I was placed in a fostered home. I'm not ashamed.
Nope, a lot of people were, Wayne.
Raised 3 kids.
Good for you.
But year 2000, my birth mother found me. And I'm from Cornerbrook. I'm from Curling originally.
Okay.
But when I was put out as a foster kid, I was back here in St. John's.
Right.
So from one day to age 40, I didn't even know who I was. So I was after being kicked out of one home. So now my uncle, which is from Curling, he said, well, Wayne, you know, I think I can get you, you're Indian. We got a band on the go and blah, blah, blah. So he said, do you want to join? I said, yeah, sure. So him and my aunt straightened everything out.
Right.
2011, me, my 2 sons, my daughter, got a card. Well, we belonged somewhere. We got something.
Wow.
2 weeks ago, I get the letter,
Yep.
just like I did when I was 1 day old. See you later.
Wow. It's powerful.
So do you think that's right?
Thank you, Wayne.
Bring that to Ottawa.
And I hear what you're saying. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes? Yep. Thank you. Well, you know, I thank Wayne for sharing that story with us. I mean, that was a case of a lot of children, really, that ended up in foster homes and really didn't know their backgrounds. It's a situation with a lot of adoptive children also, and they do their best at some point in their life, whether they're 15, 18, or 25, to find out, you know, who their parents were biologically. So he's gone through a process, and the story he told was, you know, he had trouble with acceptance as a child, belonging. So today he got a card, or he got a card in 2011, it was because they're belonging, and now we're saying to Wayne, you don't belong anymore here. Thank you for sharing that story with us. That's a sad story. Next question, please.
All right, we're going to come back this way, to this line up here, and then I'll follow up with a webcast question.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. I appreciate what you're saying. And it happened to a lot of people in a lot of communities, especially where Aboriginal people or Aboriginal ancestry were of a very, very small or a very minority. You know, why would you come out? There are companies in Newfoundland and elsewhere in Canada that had policies that probably said if you're an Indian, you can't work here. It wasn't that long ago women got a chance to vote and Aboriginal people got a chance to vote. I mean, we're not too far back from that.
And my grandmother was chief. Right? Annie Jo, her name was.
Wow.
Right? She was a pure blood.
Yeah, the Joe family, you know, in Central that we know.
I got 3 points.
Yeah, for living in Newfoundland. Okay.
So are we white?
Yep. Yep. No, I understand it. And there was discrimination. And why wouldn't his mother not want to go underground and tell anybody about it? Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I'm from Corner Brook originally.
Speak up, please.
Oh, sorry. I'm from Corner Brook, born and raised.
Yes.
And left in '94 to go to university. And
Right.
I've been in, left in '89. And arrived back into St.
Thanks for
John's
coming.
after school
Thank you.
in 1994. I travel back and forth to Corner Brook. No, I don't have a receipt for gas from 2007, nor do I have any pictures of the moose meat my father boxed up and put on the CN bus so I can pick up. I don't have any pictures of that. I mean, that's just crazy. I guess my concern is I found out, or our family found out in early 2000, I guess. It was, I belonged to the same line as Burn White down at Benoit's Cove. So we did some digging around, and I contacted the band several times down in Benoit's Cove, sending emails after emails to different people that I found on lists on the FNI. Finally, I got a reply, and this is around 2004, 2005, before Qalipu had a name or anything like that. And I'll speak to this woman up here. I asked, I want to join. I'm excited. This is new to me. I want to learn what I can. He came back and he said, no, we're not taking anybody else. We're going to make this big band is going to take in all of the West Coast. You cannot join the FNI. We're not taking members anymore. Well, that one email has cost me my status. And no one, do I have that email now from 2003? No. Will anybody believe me that that's what happened to me? No.
I believe you do.
Yeah, thank you. It's a story told to me by many people. People tried to get in a band in 2006, 2005, and they said, we're not taking anybody. Some of those people who were in charge of those bands actually said that, not even considering Qalipu First Nation. They just didn't want anybody in. It was very closed.
Exactly, and that's the way I was meant to feel.
Sure, and when the Qalipu First Nation conversation started about how we're going to form, as you referred to it, this large band to encompass everybody, band leadership did say in communities, well, not much point in getting in our band right now because a new band is going to form. Maybe they didn't know, as you didn't know at the time, that very conversation would block you from being where you need to be today. And that was a shame. That happened to a lot of people.
I'm poisoned. But the next thing I'm poisoned about, Chief, is nobody told me about a September 22nd, 2011. We applied in November of 2011. Now, if there's a date that the government says, it's a date. I don't care if it's 4 years, if it's 2 years, if it's 1 year. That's the date. So if you got 50,000 applications on the end of it because people were they procrastinated, or they were working through their birth certificates, as some know that names have been changed from LeBlanc to White, and you had to go through oodles and oodles of work to get those things straightened out. The date was November 2012. Nobody told anybody.
Yeah.
My father went to the band office in Corner Brook looking for help. No one could help him. Not one person told him, "Boy, you better get it in before September 22nd or you're going to be screwed." Okay. I almost got caught myself. That's the clean word.
You almost swore.
I did. But nobody told us. And so for the government to come out and say, we don't want newly minted Indians or recent vintage Indians. But you could apply September 15th, and you could have gotten in.
Thank you. It may be the case, And what didn't happen, maybe this whole process shouldn't have said founding members list until this process was finished after November of 2012. Because what we had to happen, people who got into this thing early got it a little easier maybe and never went under the same rigor.
Well, Chief, 5%, 6% of 70,000 people got in after that date. So you cannot tell me that anything was fair about this process. It was designed to keep people out. Bar none.
You know, I have to share with you, I had the same conversation with our council back in the day. I said, you know, when this process started, it was about getting people in. There was a nervousness around the FNI at the time. Will we get enough people to form this band? Because the rule was, if there are 10,000 people we believe to be members, at least 5,000 of them had to qualify for 50%. Had to qualify for Qalipu to form Qalipu First Nation. And that was a requirement in this process. Yeah, and there was lots of discussion about that. So people were being taken in. People were being embraced. When the supplemental agreement came in, yeah, there may have been a view, or there is a view, that now we're saying, how do we keep people out of this? Because there's too many right now, you know. And why is that? Can anybody tell me why? How many people are in? Thank you. And that's true.
And most of us don't even want the benefits. Most of us have gone through school. We got insurance plans.
I understand.
Right?
You know,
we want recognition.
And in your case, you said you came to St. John's to go to university. You know, that was an admirable thing to do. You had to do that because back in the day, programs at Grenfell, which started in 1975, Darrell and I were in the same class in 1975 together, Darrell Penny from Corner Brook. Yeah, you know, you couldn't get all the programs in that you needed, so you had to come to St. John's to finish up. So your requirement to be somewhere else because of your educational needs and availability brought you here. And while you were here, you got a job because there weren't jobs at home for you. And that happened to a lot of people in this country and people in Newfoundland that left to go to Toronto as young boys and teenagers to try to find a way to make a living for themselves somewhere else. You know, and that's how it happened. But right now, we appear to have a situation in place where you and many others like you here and in this country are being looked at differently because of where you live. I mean, this is a conversation that we're having now. I mean, I've brought this up to Canada so many times. No, I'll tell you something else. So there's another group of people that I've been speaking for. I'm going to step down here so I can see everybody. I went to the government of Canada and I said, what are we doing for our CMP people and our veterans and our servicemen today? Laying it on the line every day in the Mideast and Europe or wherever they are, or in communities as our CMP people or whatever, and lots of veterans, you know. I pinned the medal on a... I'll stop. I won't go there. A second now. So, I said, what are we going to do for these people that lay it on the line for our country? And the response was, they're getting no special treatment or consideration in this process. I was shocked when I heard that response, you know. And I pinned a medal on a guy at the Flat Bay Power last year. He wants to give me the medal back. It was an Aboriginal Service Medal. I have another gentleman who's writing me a letter. He says, I'm putting my medal in the mail. I'm never wearing it in light of what's happening. So he's been in the service, an Aboriginal person, and got an Aboriginal Service Medal from Canada, and he's sending it back to me. You know, and he didn't tell me what to do with it, but I could suggest what he'd like to tell me about that. So that's a shame, you know. And I brought that story to the government of Canada. I said, is this what we're doing to our people, our servicemen, you know, who've been there for 25 years or 30 years in the service, finally get recognized for their Aboriginal service, and now we're saying, sorry, you're not a status Indian anymore, and now they want to give me the medal back. It's a sad description of where we are as a country.
While we're serving the country, we still have voting rights for Humber, Port-au-Port, St. Barb, or Humber, Port-au-Port, Bainbridge. Tom Marshall sends you letters all the time when I was in for 36 years. Tom Marshall sent you letters, Jerry Burns sent you letters, Goody Hutchins sent you letters. There's 4 or 5 plus here today in the same situation. But when it comes to blindness, I send in a copy of all my postings that I had through my career and where it was to, my family, the whole 9 yards. What do you get out of it? 0. But I only left the Corner Brook for one reason, and one reason only.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that story with you in my attempts to try to get some recognition and some consideration for RCMP people, veterans, and our servicemen today. They're away not because of anything other than they're trying to serve their communities, their provinces, and their country. Yes, thank you. Next question up here.
Hello. Like the sister who spoke before, I applied for F&I as well, or was about to, and was told verbally, no, don't bother because we're creating a new band.
Right.
Now, there are a few other things. My documentation is about 300 pages that I submitted. At 4 points, I didn't qualify under the Mi'kmaq culture and way of life. I come from a community that was dark to its way of life. I'm from Lejeune, Young, Benoit, Benite, Stevens was my great-great-grandfather. Quarter of Newfoundland out on the west coast was his trapping and hunting grounds. A quarter is recognized by Frank Speck in his book. That's a lot of land, but yet now it's turned over to Ottawa to do as it pleases with. But that's not my ancestral land anymore because I'm no longer a Mi'kmaq within this band as a founding member as I was. It was a binding agreement. No longer. Why can we not now go to Ottawa with this supplemental agreement and say, we want a supplemental agreement to the supplemental agreement? Because it doesn't have to be binding. Now, I just want to focus in on the Mi'kmaq culture and way of life. Part of the Mi'kmaq culture and way of life is the very fact that Mi'kmaq from the main of the United States, all the coast, Atlantic coast, all the way down, all the way up to Newfoundland, and even up on the coast of Labrador, traveled. They traveled yearly. They traveled and stayed in places for decades. They stayed in places for decades, only then to go home and retire. Now, that's part of their culture. That's part of my way of life. My traditional peoples traveled and migrated. We are called Qalipu. Why? Caribou. Caribou migrate. What do the Qalipu do? We follow the caribou. Okay, so we are living in a contradiction of terms. We are saying we are this, but we are saying we are not. So how can I be a Mi'kmaq traditionally in one regard because I have never attended a powwow? I couldn't because there was none in Burgeo. I couldn't attend a powwow. I could not attend traditional ceremonies, drumming ceremonies, join any groups because in my Mi'kmaq community of Burgeo, we were taught to be ashamed. I am Mi'kmaq on both sets of my family side. One community is not a recognized community. And both sets of those family, I'm Mi'kmaq. 30 years, my oldest brother looked into these things. 30 years. He just got married this past year in full Mi'kmaq regalia, full Mi'kmaq marriage. You were there, Chief.
Thank you.
You witnessed the whole thing.
Sure did.
And I thank God for my brother because he brought light to not just me and my family, but to my entire community. He is hogtied sometimes, it seems, because of people. Over 3,000 people hogtied him. How do I get status? How do I do this? How do I do that? Burgeo right now, I know you will be going there, and I'm very happy for that. I have a cousin who returned his medal. He returned his medal of service because of this situation. It goes on and on. I could keep telling story after story. I am here in this part of the community now, or in this part of the island, I should say. Or maybe community is right because we are a community, aren't we? Yeah. Newfoundland is a complete community. I come from a background of on one grandparent's side or two grandparents' side of 16 siblings in my mother's family. On my other father's side, or my father's side, 13 siblings. Each one of those individuals in those families had about anywhere from 2 to 7 children. I'm not surprised that there's about 100,000 people in Newfoundland that claim Mi'kmaq. There's probably more. We got more Mi'kmaq blood here than you can imagine in this province. There's more Mi'kmaq than probably European. Most of us just don't know it. But why am I here in St. John's? Thanks to the cod moratorium. The federal government, the same government now that's telling me I'm not Mi'kmaq, told me I had to leave my community because there's no fishery, there's no lifestyle. The tradition of Newfoundland was disappearing in that particular community and many other communities. I came here. Since I've been here and right now I work in a job with the provincial government, and we all know the fiscal situation. For 10 years, I've been a temporary employee. 10 years. I might have my head on the block next. 300 people got laid off today. Or 300 positions, I should say. Over 280 people, I believe, got laid off. Now, I've got 5 pages already on my appeal. 5 pages. I don't know when to stop because I can keep going. I don't understand why I have to prove any more than the 300 pages. I've been trying to learn about my Mi'kmaq ancestry. As you know, my brother, he's been teaching me. He's been teaching me much.
Thank you. Yeah, Perry lives it every day.
He does, and he's teaching it to his family and his community every day.
He's actually a member of the Qalipu Cultural Foundation.
He is. But again, the recognition that he brings is for himself, but he wants to translate that to his entire family. He's recognized within the Qalipu Mi'kmaq Band. I'm not. Because I'm here under duress of my government, who now tells me that I am no longer allowed to be a Mi'kmaq or Qalipu Mi'kmaq. And likewise, the 6.1 and the 6.2. I mean, I'm disgusted to know that I could be rated as a 6.1 Indian or a 6.2. This is a class system that we're talking about here. We've gone beyond this. And I just wanted to make this one last point, if I could. As a 6.1 Indian, I can fall under as my mother. My mother submitted her information under the FNI. She got accepted. So did my brother. So did my sister. All these people, except for my brother now, they all live the same Mi'kmaq traditional way of life I did. It's called Newfoundland tradition. Now, as a 6.1 that I could fall under my mother, my children will no longer have the benefits. I'm here for my children. I'm not here for me, but for them. So this is a fight not just about me becoming a status necessarily for me and only me, but it's for them. My wife got rejected too. So we don't have the opportunities that a lot of people have for having next to no recognition. 300 pages?
Thank you. And again, thanks so much for what you said.
We'll work on ours. This my sister will work on it.
And again, in this process, the principal difference between your situation and your brother Perry's situation is what? Perry lives there, and you live here. All right. Thank you. Thanks for your comments. Much appreciated. Next, please. Yeah. Sylvia.
Mr. Gesso, I sympathize with you. I was in the same position. My dad burned to death when I was 6, and I ended up in an orphanage and foster home, 13 of them, as a matter of fact. And I didn't know too much about who I was. But I did go back to Cornerbrook quite often. I got to know my grandmother, who had 17 children, my dad's mom. From there, to make it short, out of those 17 children, 1 of my aunts and uncles got on, 1, and 7 cousins out of 268 of us.
Wow.
I get a bit emotional about it. I cried when I got my letter in 2011 telling me that I was going to be an Indian. I'm accepted. I cried again when I got my card. And the other day I did get it and said, well, we only gave you 3 points for living in Newfoundland. Meanwhile, I fit all the criteria to be able to be accepted. And listening to everyone's story here tonight, sorry, I'm shaking. Listening to all the stories, I think 268 of my family should all be on, because my ancestors went through hell here in Newfoundland. And I think not only myself, I'm up in age. I mean, I've got my own insurance, but it's my girls and my 3 grandchildren that I would like to see taken care of. My aunts and uncles who are still alive and their children, I would love to see all of them. And if my other family members don't get accepted, I don't want this card. And that's from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. Sylvia is a person who every day is actively involved. She's a person who spends a lot of time at the St. John's Native Center down there. And I've been with them many times there and visit and drumming and watch them drum and stuff and do other things. So I know how active you've been in participating
She
in
lives
your
it
culture.
every day.
Every day, thank you. And probably some others that are here tonight too. And, I don't know what to say to you, Sylvia, tonight. It's a shame that this thing is happening because I know how you felt it and how you feel in your heart in terms of your beliefs. Thank you very much. You feel like him tonight. Thank you for supporting him in
No
that.
matter what program this government is going to bring in, it doesn't matter. I worked with the government for 35 years. I've seen them cancel contracts.
Yep.
Oh yeah, we can overturn that. No problem.
Thank you, Sylvia.
His little initial on it is changed in 2 days.
Thank you. I just want to say something here about Canada and a representation from Canada. Where are they? They're not coming here to talk to us. I've asked the minister to come here and others. I say, why are you not being interviewed? I'm being pounded for interviews to try to talk about the situation, support our people, and yes, sometimes too, to defend the situation and myself. But I'm yet to hear Canada come out and say, and I've asked them, please come to Newfoundland, please speak out and tell people why this is happening and be absolutely, brutally honest if that's what you think we need to do. That's what I think we need to do. That's what Canada needs to do. But so far, we haven't seen much from them. I did see Fred Curran in an interview with CTV television out of Halifax the other night, and he made a couple of comments about this and that. But I'd like to see the minister come among our people and feel what we're feeling tonight and what I'm feeling, to feel your hurt and your pain and your tears and emotions.
Chief Mitchell, this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you. Anyway, next question, please.
Actually, we're going to take it over here online. So my phone cut out. My mother passed away on July 7th, 2013, and was a founding member since 2010.
Right.
I called Winnipeg and Corner Brook because I received a letter in November 2013 asking for more information. They told me to send her death certificate, and I asked if I should send further data, and they said no. I then received a letter for her on February 3rd saying she was denied under communication and travel, but she received 9 points for being a member prior to 2008. I called the 1-800 number and Corner Brook, and no one can tell me what to do other than to file an appeal for her. But how did they expect her to provide further information from the grave? Shouldn't she have remained a founding member because she was deceased prior to this new criteria? This is very important because if I lose my appeal, then I won't be able to apply as a 6'2" child. I received 2 points for communication and 4 for travel for a total of 6. And she lived with me, so would have had used the same data and received the points to remain.
Okay. First of all, this lady who made this inquiry, if her mother was a status Indian or a 6'1" Indian through Qalipu, all right, even though she died in 2013, I thought you said?
2013, yes.
13, right. So this lady who was inquiring certainly can file under her mother because she was a member at that time and has passed away since. We heard from a number of people also in this process that got letters, about their parents, got an acceptance letter, for example, for a parent who had died. The problem with that is that, no one knew that person died because the family member never updated that file. But maybe on the good side of things, that if they continue to they got this letter saying your mother is accepted, meaning that as a 6'1" potential person, they now can follow through and get that status. Okay, so, my only suggestion to this lady is that she can make an appeal, I'm assuming, can't she?
That's what she said,
Right,
yes.
make an appeal, and, and we're going to help her appeal. We're going to appeal with her, what I'm trying to say here. At the end of the day, though, if that fails entirely, because her mother was a member of the band, even though she passed in 2013, that would enable this lady to maintain a Section 6.2 status in any case. Okay.
So you're saying that she can mail refer to the information in her appeal on behalf of her mother? Because it's her mother that would need to send in the appeal, but she can't.
Okay, I'm just at a loss as to why we would be appealing for her mother. She's already passed, other than the fact that the daughter would get something from her mother appealing.
Well, her mother has 9 points.
Yeah.
And I guess she sent in information with her package to refer to community acceptance.
So
she
her
needs
mother is
those
not a
extra
part of the
points.
band anymore.
The mother who passed was
that
denied.
That would impact the daughter.
Yes.
Okay. Tell her to make sure she appeals, tell the story. All right, and I want to say this, in terms of those appeals, the form, many of you have these forms, it's only a small space. If you want an edge, page or 2 or 3 or whatever, add them and tell your story, I'll talk to Canada on Friday about the possibility of providing some documentation. Maybe not the whole story, because then people will be saying, well, I didn't give you anything, but let me give you everything. That may happen. I'll see if there's some interest in trying to help somebody with a piece of information that may help them. They will tell me probably, though, the rules are the rules. But rules can be changed. You know, I like to comment somebody had, was it the supplemental to the supplemental? I kind of like that. Where'd that come from? Over here. That's something you may want to look at. Maybe there's an opportunity to do something here. I don't know. You know. Wait, now, we have... Yep. Lovely, thank you. Good idea. Good idea. So type your stuff in. You get more typing into it than you would if you're writing by hand. Next question over here. Thank you for that.
So my name's Katie. I received my letter on February 8th. I called INAC that same day. I've called them 5 times since. Each time I've received different varying information, which is quite concerning, and my file still isn't here to me.
Okay.
And as I was a minor at the time, that's quite concerning, especially where I'm in the process of writing my dissertation on Indigenous environmental history. Okay. So my time limit is very, very, very tight, and even though it's been extended for 2 weeks, it's still quite concerning.
Okay. All right, thank you. Here's what I suggest you do. You have to make another request for your file. Okay, you have a right to... Yeah, you made a second request. Good. All right. Thank you. A third. Wow. That's really not great service, and I'll address that issue with the government people also when we talk again. And it's not just one conversation on Friday. I'll be at this as we go forward over the next 13 months or so to try to get this thing straightened away. And this is a tough situation we're facing, but we'll keep at it, you know. And I like the suggestion that I'm getting here. You're telling me stuff today, many of you, that I haven't even thought about. And this is why it's important for us to talk like this. Now we have ideas that you've given me. Instead of being here entirely, you know, we could be here all night complaining and stuff, but I'm actually getting really good information and suggestions that we can bring back to try to improve this situation a little bit. Thank you. Next question. Over here.
Hi. Well, first of all...
Speak up, please, so we can hear you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm white, as far as I know. I have family members that look Native Indian. When I was born, my father went around trying to figure out where the Indian blood came from, but yet I don't look Indian. It's just the way that I acted. However, I feel strongly that we're at a crossroads, and that crossroads being between... You know, when you do Freemason history and the Rothschilds and you do the Indian status, it seems the more and more that we have to prove on paper what our identity is, the less rights that we use or the less rights that we prove by seeking out to get some sort of letters or to get some sort of confirmation that we're allowed to exist under some sort of tax system through the federal government, that we're actually raping ourselves of our own rights through that identification. And I find that quite disturbing because I am being erased. And what I mean by that is I stood outside with a sign, with painted signs. I laid down on the ground, pretended to be dead for representing 500 Newfoundlanders that were killed many years ago. They were just shot over like genocide. And here I am white, and I know what that Aboriginal community feels like when it comes to being profiled. Because I had something bad happen to me, which I've constantly been saying has been witness intimidation, I've seemed to fall into that classification of those that are unwanted, and it seems to have that conversation attached to it, that I'm not allowed to exist either. Unfortunately for me, I'm not Aboriginal. I'm sorry, my tongue got tied because I'm getting nervous. But the thing about it is, because I'm not Aboriginal, or I don't have that Rothschild status that Aboriginal community seems to be going after, to have that close bloodline connection that you seem to be fighting, the same as the Jews, when it comes to whether or not you got a right to exist. I feel that this gives us an opportunity to be able to take that 10-2 and be able to vote in, all of us, in Newfoundlanders. I think that this would be an opportunity for us to be able to sell that vote under that 10-2 section and be able to open up those bloodline tests that one would need to be able to prove that one can get better tax write-offs than another one. Because I do believe that we're all Native here. us as Newfoundlanders have an opportunity to be able to go really after the UN. And if you've got some sort of wormhole that you can open up that Indian Act to be able to do and say